Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere bitter cold, absurdly remote, and extremely unfit for human life. So, perfect bedtime material. Imagine being alone in the dead of winter, wrapped in layers of fur, tucked inside a one-room log cabin that creaks like a haunted rocking chair with every gust of wind. You're not warm, you're not even close, but you're alive, for now. Welcome to the harsh, brittle world of the mountain man winter. You're going to live through this, maybe. Probably not. Historically speaking, you probably won't survive this. But hey, it's bedtime, so let's take that anxiety and wrap it in a blanket of snow and distant howling wolves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late autumn, maybe the first week of November, and you're already behind. The clouds have that sickly grey tone that warns of snow before the sun has a chance to rise. The wind smells like ice and dead leaves. You're standing at the edge of a clearing at around 7,000 feet in the Rockies, and your breath is coming out in foggy bursts. You have a cabin, barely. 4 walls, no insulation, roof just a pile of overlapping logs with gaps that stare down at you like judgmental ghosts. The fireplace is cracked, the door doesn't seal, and you're down to maybe 5 good logs of dry wood. Winter isn't coming, it's already here. Your feet crunch over frosted soil as you do a perimeter check. Not because you're expecting something, though the occasional bear still hasn't bedded down, but more out of instinct. Or nerves. Everything is brittle in this cold. Trees snap in the wind. Your boots creak when they flex. Even your fingers feel like they could shatter if you move them wrong. And you feel it. Not just the cold, but the weight of the season. You're not just surviving the elements, you're surviving the sheer duration of them. Historically, mountain men like you didn't just accidentally winter in the wilderness. They had to plan for it, often months in advance. Because once the snow set in, travel became close to impossible. Imagine trying to hike through 6 feet of snow with a musket, 3 pelts tied to your back, and boots that might as well be paper towels. There were no store runs, no backup plans. You had what you had. You glance at your meagre supplies. Dried meat, some cornmeal, a few pounds of beans. If you stretch them and manage to snare some rabbits, you might make it to spring. That's assuming you don't get frostbite or lose a toe or 3. Oh, and don't forget scurvy, the slow, creeping disease of the fruitless and the hopeless. But here's a funny twist in history. Some mountain men actually preferred winter. The fur trade was booming in the early 1800s, and colder weather meant thicker pelts. Beaver, fox, wolf, all their fur came in rich and full when the temperatures dropped. So yeah, survival was brutal, but the payout was big if you could haul it back alive. And that's a big if. You poke the fire inside your tiny, smoky cabin. The logs pop and hiss, still damp. The room smells like wet bark and desperation. Your bed is a pile of evergreen boughs layered with animal skins. A red fox pelt, traded for jerky and bullets, serves as a pillow. Your fingers are numb, so you press them against your ribs, skin to skin. Your breath rattles out, and for a moment you wonder if you're catching a fever. That's another thing. Being sick out here isn't just inconvenient, it's a death sentence. Outside, snow starts to fall again. Light, delicate flakes that float like ash. You stare through the chinks in the log walls, where the mud and moss haven't held. Every gust of wind sends a draft right across your face. You make a mental note to redo the sealant tomorrow, if it's not too cold. If you can move, there's a worn journal next to your bedroll. The page is warped from years of cabin air. You flip it open to an old entry, something about hunting with Big Tom near the Snake River. You smile at the memory. He once claimed a squirrel stole his pipe, and then blamed it for his lost tobacco for weeks. You haven't seen him in over a year. He might have died, or moved east, or just got tired of fighting for every warm breath. Here's where it gets even weirder. Some scholars debate whether these men, these hardened, stoic survivors, were actually as rugged as the legends say. Diaries reveal fear, homesickness, and a lot of complaining. One trapper wrote that he cried when the snow caved in his roof and all his jerky got wet. Another claimed to have long conversations with his axe, like full conversations. There's no shame in it. You're starting to see why. When the sun sets at 4 p.m. and it's dark until 8 the next morning, the mind starts playing games. You think you hear wolves when it's wind. You think you see smoke when it's fog. Once you woke up swearing someone was breathing right behind you, only to find your coat shifting in the draft. Still you stay, because going means dying, and staying means maybe living. A coin toss, really. You check the fire again, feed it one more log, your last dry one. The room flickers in amber glow. Outside, night tightens its grip and the snow falls heavier now. You pull your buffalo robe tighter, lean back, and whisper to yourself something your father once said about winter. You don't beat the cold, you just outlast it. And with that thought you close your eyes, not for sleep exactly, sleep is dangerous in this cold, but for rest. A light doze, one ear always tuned to the sound of crackling wood or silence. Because silence can mean a lot of things out here. You wake before dawn, not because you're rested, but because the cold has decided it's time. The fire has collapsed into a bed of grey ash, and the air inside the cabin feels sharp enough to cut your lungs. Your breath fogs immediately, hanging low like a warning. This is the part no one romanticizes. The moment when warmth isn't just absent, it feels actively hostile. Like the world is offended you're still here. You sit up slowly, joints protesting, listening. The mountains are never truly silent, but winter comes close. Somewhere far off, a tree cracks under the pressure of frozen sap expanding. A sound like a rifle shot echoing through the valley. Your heart jumps anyway. Out here, every noise is either nothing or the beginning of the end, and you don't get to know which until it's too late. This is why the mountains kill people. It's not just the temperature, though that's bad enough. At this elevation, the cold behaves differently. The air is thinner, drier, and far less forgiving. Heat bleeds from your body faster than your instincts can register, especially at night. Wind slides downhill like a living thing, finding every weakness in your cabin, every loose chink, every careless seam in your clothing. Even on days when the sun shines, it offers more light than warmth, a visual trick that lures the unprepared into deadly optimism. You pull on your boots stiff with frost. They don't bend so much as creak. Your fingers struggle with the laces, clumsy and numb, and you have to stop twice just to shove them under your armpits and feel something again. This, right here, is a historical fact mountain men learned the hard way. Dexterity disappears long before consciousness. You don't freeze to death dramatically. You freeze to death because you can't tie a knot. Once outside, the cold hits you like a physical force. The sky is pale, almost colourless, and the snow squeaks beneath your feet, a sound that only happens when it's truly, brutally cold. You take stock of the land the way you always do. Tree line to the north breaks the wind. A slope to the west catches afternoon sun. The creek below is frozen solid now, no dark water visible. This location wasn't chosen for beauty. It was chosen for survival math. Mountain men didn't wander randomly and throw up cabins wherever they felt inspired. That's a myth. In reality, they were painfully strategic. Cabins were built low on slopes, never on ridge lines where wind could strip heat in minutes. South-facing exposure mattered. So did access to timber and water, close enough to reach without exhaustion, far enough to avoid flooding in spring. Choosing wrong didn't just mean discomfort, it meant death by February. There's a quirky detail historians still argue about. Some trappers intentionally built their cabins ugly. Crooked walls, uneven roofs, minimal space. Not because they lacked skill, but because smaller, irregular interiors trapped heat better. A tight, awkward cabin warms faster and stays warm longer. Symmetry, it turns out, is a luxury of people who aren't freezing. You duck back inside and restart the fire, coaxing embers into reluctant flame. Smoke fills the cabin immediately, stinging your eyes. There's no proper chimney, just a crude vent in the roof, and you crouch low to avoid the worst of it. This balance, warmth versus suffocation, was a constant gamble. Carbon monoxide wasn't a concept yet, but plenty of mountain men simply never woke up. Scholars still debate how many winter deaths blamed on the cold were actually quiet poisonings from bad ventilation. As the fire catches, you chew on a strip of dried meat, hard as leather. Calories are currency now. Every movement costs energy, and energy is finite. This is another truth the mountains enforce. Starvation isn't sudden. It's slow, boring, and humiliating. You don't collapse heroically. You just get weaker, colder, and less motivated to do the things that would save you. By mid-morning, the sun finally spills into the clearing, lighting the snow with painful brightness. You step outside again, squinting and scan for tracks. Rabbit, maybe. Fox. No deer. Too deep into winter. You set a snare anyway, fingers aching as you work. Mountain men often relied more on trapping than hunting during winter, because it conserved energy. Chasing game through snowdrifts was a losing strategy unless you were desperate. And desperation changes people. There are journal entries from the early 1800s where trappers admitted to eating their own dogs. Others boiled leather moccasins for the glue. One particularly grim account mentions mixing sawdust into soup just to feel full. Historians argue whether these stories were exaggerated to impress readers back east. But the fact remains, winter pushed people to edges they never forgot. Back in the cabin, you spend the afternoon reinforcing the walls. Mud, moss, bits of grass, anything to seal the gaps. Your hands burn as feeling slowly returns, then fade again. This repetitive, mindless labour is part survival, part sanity. Doing nothing in winter is dangerous, not just physically, but mentally. Long stretches of inactivity let fear grow roots. By late afternoon, clouds roll back in, thick and low. Snow starts again, heavier this time. You watch it fall through the narrow window slit, each flake another grain in the hourglass. Night will come early, it always does. You add wood to the fire, careful, calculating. This pile has to last. Outside the mountains loom, indifferent and ancient. They've killed stronger men than you, men with better gear, better luck, better stories. The only reason you're still here is because so far you've made fewer mistakes than the cold. As darkness settles, the cabin begins its nightly chorus. Logs contracting, roof shifting, wind testing every joint. You sit close to the fire, wrapped in furs, staring into the flames. Somewhere out there, the temperature is dropping again. Somewhere closer, something moves in the trees. You remind yourself of the rule every mountain man learned eventually. The mountains don't care how tough you think you are. They only care how prepared you are. And tomorrow you'll test that preparation all over again. The storm builds overnight, not with howling winds or thunderous drama, but with the quiet, relentless pressure of snow stacking inch by inch against your door. You wake up buried in stillness, the kind that feels unnatural. Not a bird, not a breeze, just the low creak of your own ribcage expanding under fur blankets, and the almost inaudible hiss of the last log turning into ember. You sit up slowly, wrapped in silence thick enough to chew. Something about this particular quiet unnerves you. It's the kind that makes you wonder if the world outside just stopped. You reach out and touch the wall, cold, damp. Your breath fogs, drifts sideways. That draft is back. You curse under your breath and rub your hands, forcing circulation back into your fingers, which feel like stiff cloth, not skin. Outside, snow has drifted up nearly 3 feet, pressed against your door like a body leaning in. You test it, it barely opens, you're snowed in. Not surprising, it's part of the game, but still it triggers something primal, that squeeze in your chest, that flicker of panic that says, what if this is the one you don't get out of? You shake it off, you've got a plan, or at least the next few hours covered. First step, wood. You push the door harder, shoulder into it until it opens just wide enough for you to slip through. Snow pours in like water. It's fine. You'll shovel it out later, if you can find the shovel. For now, you step outside into a white that blinds you. It reflects light like a mirror, bouncing the grey morning sky back in your eyes. You blink, squint, feel the cold in your teeth. There's a specific kind of ache that comes from breathing in air this cold. It hits your sinuses like tiny hammers, and your lungs feel raw. Your first stop is the woodpile, buried now under a smooth, deceptive hill of snow. You dig with gloved hands, finding frozen logs stuck together like bricks. This is where the real logistics of cabin life begin. You do the math in your head. How much wood does it take to stay alive each day? A quarter cord, maybe more in weather like this. That's about 6 armloads of wood per day, every day, for months. If you didn't start stacking back in August, you're already behind. Spoiler, you're behind. Most mountain men were. They underestimated, always, thought they could stretch what they had. But a fire burns what it burns, and it doesn't care about optimism. There's an old rule passed around among trappers, something like, if you think you have enough wood, double it, then double it again. It wasn't just folklore, it was survival calculus. Without enough dry wood, everything else fails. You could be wearing every pelt from the Hudson's Bay Company and still die in your sleep without a fire. Back inside, the cabin smells like smoke, fur and damp boots. You stack new wood near the hearth, warming it before use. Cold logs are stubborn. They take longer to catch, produce more smoke. You can't afford to waste kindling. Not now. The room is dark, even though it's morning. Snow outside muffles light the way it muffles sound. You feel like you're in a bunker under some endless siege. You settle into routine. Light the fire, boil water from snow, check traps if possible, patch the cabin walls. The rhythm keeps you sane. But today, the cold is worse than usual. Bone deep. You wrap your hands around the boiling pot for heat, ignoring the slight smell of singed wool from your gloves. The fire crackles weakly. It's working, but just barely. You sit closer until the steam hits your face and makes your cheeks sting. The cabin creaks again, louder this time. You pause, listening. It's just the weight of snow shifting on the roof. Probably. Mountain cabins were designed for this mostly. Low-pitched roofs to prevent collapse, overlapping logs pinned together with pegs. You remember when you built it, you thought you were over-engineering. Now you wonder if you weren't ambitious enough. Mountain men didn't build cabins to last forever. Just long enough. Just strong enough. The idea was survival, not aesthetics. A common trick, notching corners tight so wind couldn't slip through. And using the right wood mattered too. Lodgepole pine, often straight, uniform, easy to stack. Not because it was beautiful, because it behaved under pressure. Here's a weird little fringe detail. Some mountain men swore by using animal blood in their chinking mix, mud, moss and blood, to seal gaps. Claimed it froze harder and kept out spirits. Is it true? Debated. But considering the options, you can't exactly blame them for experimenting with superstition. You step outside again later, hoping the storm has let up. It hasn't. Snow falls in soft, relentless curtains. Your traps are buried. Your waterhole in the creek is sealed over again. You'll have to break through with the hatchet. You sigh, turn back toward the cabin, and feel a moment of unease looking at it from outside. It's small, it's temporary, and it's everything. You built it with your own hands, dragged logs, cut trees, fitted joints with a dull hatchet. You remember your fingers bleeding, back burning, every movement a gamble against time. It didn't feel heroic then. It felt exhausting. But standing here, snow up to your thighs, breath fogging the air, you realize something weird. You trust it. Not because it's flawless, but because it's yours. Still, there's always doubt. Some historians argue that mountain men relied less on their cabins than we think. That many preferred lean-tos, caves, even hollowed-out trees during mild winters. Cabins took time, resources and energy not everyone had. But in winters like this, even the most stubborn-built walls, inside again, fire flickering low, you eat a handful of beans. Your fingers are stiff and taste smoke. You chew slowly, listening to the soft patter of snow on the roof. You stare at the walls, the gaps you filled, the scars in the wood, the tiny tufts of moss that still haven't fallen out. It's not beautiful, but it's holding. Night comes early again. You lie back on your pile of fir and pine, coat pulled over your chest, boots still on. You don't undress at night anymore. Too risky, too cold. You let the fire burn low, listening. The mountains groan in the distance. Somewhere far off, a branch snaps under weight. Then silence. You exhale, slow and long, watching your breath drift toward the roof. Tomorrow you'll shovel the roof, check for rot, maybe reinforce the door. And tomorrow night, if you're lucky, you'll be doing this exact same thing again. Because out here, repetition is victory. Every morning you wake up is one more day you didn't lose to the cold. Morning comes disguised as night. The sky barely lighter than charcoal when you open your eyes. Your body aches in that deep, slow way that means you slept, but not well. The fire has survived the night, barely, a thin ribbon of smoke curling from a single stubborn coal. You feed it gently, like coaxing a skittish animal, and wait for warmth to creep back into the room. It does, reluctantly, stopping short of comfort. Today isn't about hunting or wandering or improving things. Today is about construction. Or more accurately, finishing what you should have finished weeks ago. Because winter doesn't forgive unfinished work. You step outside with your axe slung over your shoulder, boots crunching through yesterday's snowfall. The storm has eased, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean and painfully bright. The trees stand frozen mid-gesture, branches bowed, every needle outlined in white. It's beautiful in the same way a blade is beautiful. Clean, sharp, and dangerous if you linger too long admiring it. You chose this spot for your cabin for a reason. Not the view, never the view. You chose it because the slope shields you from the worst winds, because the timber is close, because hauling logs uphill in winter would have broken you. These were the quiet calculations mountain men made constantly, even if later stories made it sound like instinct or luck. It wasn't. It was experience, or learning the hard way. The logs you cut weeks ago lie half buried near the tree line. You dig them out one by one, brushing snow away, checking for cracks. Cold makes wood brittle. A bad log can split when it's under load, and if that happens at the wrong time, you don't just lose a wall, you lose heat, safety, maybe fingers. You roll them closer to the cabin, muscles burning almost immediately. Sweat forms under your layers, and you force yourself to stop. Sweat is dangerous. Wet clothes in this cold are an invitation to hypothermia. This is one of those historical truths people forget. Mountain men worked slower in winter, not faster. Rushing got you killed. You notch the ends carefully, axe blows measured and deliberate. Each strike sends a dull thud through the frozen air. Your hands vibrate with every impact. You pause often, flexing fingers, breathing into them. The cabin grows by inches, log by log, sealing another weak point where wind used to slip through and steal your heat at night. Cabin building wasn't an art form out here. It was triage. Most were single-room structures, barely tall enough to stand in. High ceilings wasted heat. Windows were rare and small, sometimes just a greased hide stretched over an opening. Light was a luxury. Warmth was mandatory. There's a persistent debate among historians about how skilled these builders really were. Some argue mountain men were crude, improvisational at best. Others point to surviving cabins and journals that show a surprising understanding of physics, airflow, insulation, thermal mass. You fall somewhere in the middle. You're not an architect. But you've learned enough to know what works, mostly by watching what fails. By midday, the sun offers a brief illusion of warmth. You eat standing up, leaning against the cabin wall, chewing dried meat that tastes faintly of smoke and pine pitch. You don't sit. Sitting too long makes it harder to get moving again, and movement is heat. Stillness is surrender. Inside, you start chinking the new seams. Mud frozen into bricks has to be thawed by the fire before it's usable. You mix it with moss and grass, pressing it into gaps with numb fingers. It's messy, uneven work. It dries lumpy. You don't care. Every filled crack is one less place for wind to whisper through your dreams. Here's another odd detail that doesn't make it into the legends. Cabins were loud, at night especially. Logs popped as temperatures dropped. Roofs shifted under snow load. Nails, when they existed at all, groaned. Many mountain men reported sleeping poorly not because of fear, but because the cabin itself sounded like it was slowly falling apart. Some scholars think this constant noise contributed to paranoia and exhaustion. Others think it was just annoying. Either way, silence was rare. As afternoon fades, clouds creep back in, dulling the light. You rush to finish one last section before dark. Your movements grow clumsier as fatigue sets in. This is dangerous territory. Most serious injuries didn't happen during dramatic hunts or storms. They happened during mundane work, slipping with an axe, dropping a log, misjudging a step. You slow down again, forcing patience. Finally you step back and look at the cabin. It's squat, uneven, scarred. The roof sags slightly under snow, but it holds. The door fits better now, weighted with an extra plank. It won't stop everything, but it will stop enough. Night falls fast. You clear snow from the roof with careful strokes, sending it sliding down in heavy sheets. If you don't, the weight can build until even a well-built roof gives way. This was a constant winter chore. One more thing on the endless list of things that couldn't be ignored. Inside again, the fire feels almost generous tonight. Or maybe you're just tired enough to be grateful. You peel off your outer layer and hang it near the hearth, close but not too close. Burned clothes don't keep you warm. You rub your hands, noticing the cracked skin, the red lines that sting. You've stopped counting minor injuries. They're just part of you now. You eat slowly. Beans, boiled thick. You drink melted snow, still tasting faintly of ash. You sit on your bed of pine boughs and firs, staring at the wall you reinforced today. It looks solid. You nod to yourself, a small private acknowledgement. Somewhere outside, wind picks up again, testing your work. You listen as it moves around the cabin, probing, searching for weaknesses. It finds fewer than before. Not none, but fewer. You lie down, fully clothed, boots on, knife within reach. The fire crackles softly. The cabin answers with creaks and sighs settling into the night. You let your eyes close, not completely trusting sleep, but allowing rest. Tomorrow will bring more work. It always does. But tonight, for the first time in days, the cold feels held at bay. Not defeated, just delayed. And out here, delaying winter is the closest thing to winning. By the time you wake, the light has shifted again. Not brighter, just greyer. There's something soft and strange about the air inside the cabin, still, heavy. You lie there for a long moment, buried under furs, listening to nothing. And that's the problem. The fire's dead. Completely. No hiss, no crackle. Just a blackened heap of charred wood that didn't make it through the night. Your breath puffs in the cold air and drifts upward like smoke that forgot its job. It's below, freezing inside. Not the cosy, well-wrapped kind of cold where you shiver under a blanket and joke about your toes falling off. No, this is the cold that settles in your bones, curls around your heart, and whispers, "You waited too long." Your fingers ache before you even move. You throw off the covers and sit up fast. Bad idea. Dizziness hits you, sharp and sudden, and for a second the cabin swims. That's hunger. Or maybe the cold stealing too much of your blood flow. You blink hard, force your eyes to focus, and push yourself upright. One thing at a time. Restarting a fire from nothing is a nasty way to start the day. You curse quietly under your breath as you reach for your tinder bag. The kindling is dry, barely. You get a spark going, then a flame, then feed it like some angry newborn creature that only understands screaming and heat. You breathe life into it, one shallow puff at a time, and eventually it crackles again. Weak, but growing. That fire becomes everything. Without it, your cabin might as well be a crypt. This is where design matters. You glance around the interior, seeing it with the sharp eye of necessity. The walls are thick, 6-inch logs, stacked and notched, sealed with your desperate frozen chinking. The ceiling is low and the roof pitched just enough to keep snow sliding instead of sitting. Your fireplace is roughly built, a mix of rock, clay, and wishful thinking. The hearthstones radiate heat slowly, giving back what they absorb. It's not elegant, but it works, usually. Early mountain cabins weren't exactly engineering marvels, but there were patterns. Most were rectangular, with a single window slit for light, and a door hung on crude hinges, sometimes just leather straps nailed into the logs. Floors were dirt. The wealthier trappers might have laid down planks or bark. You're not that wealthy. Your boots scrape frost off the packed earth every time you move. Some mountain men took pride in building fast. A good cabin could be roughed out in a week with help, or 2 or 3 weeks alone. But speed came with trade-offs. Walls might lean, roofs might sag, and sometimes cabins were never meant to last more than one winter anyway. You weren't building a homestead. You were building a shelter, a shield, a space to not die in. One of the quirks of these shelters, they were rarely square. Perfect symmetry wasted time and space. You'd often find corners that didn't quite meet, or logs that jutted out at odd angles. In some cases, cabins were more like half huts, backed up against boulders or cliffs to save materials. Every piece of wood had to be chopped, dragged, lifted and fit, and you felt every ounce of it in your back. You pull your coat tight and inspect the walls again. The wind found a new draft last night. You can see your breath curling sideways through a gap near the corner. That spot's next on your list. You press your palm to it. Cold leaks in like guilt. There's a historical mystery about cabin design that still sparks debate. Why did some mountain men build so low to the ground that they couldn't stand upright inside? Some say it was to conserve heat. Others say it discouraged guests. The more superstitious claimed it was to keep spirits from entering, that low thresholds forced ghosts to bow, something they couldn't do. You don't know what you believe, but you've had nights out here where you wouldn't have minded a spirit or two, just for company. The day crawls forward. You boil snow for water, even though it tastes like ashen bark. You chew old meat and dried berries and pretend it's enough. Outside, the trees creak as the temperature rises a degree or two. The sun peeks through briefly, then hides again. You spend the day patching that draft, driving chunks of moss into the gap, sealing it with a new layer of mud mixed with your own breath. You've learned to hold warmth like a miser holds coins. Inside, smoke curls. Up and out the crude flue above the fireplace. Your eyes sting, but your hands are warm, and that's a trade you'll take every time. You shift logs in the fire, planning your wood ration. Burn too much now, and you'll regret it in January. Burn too little, and you might not see January. You find yourself inspecting your cabin the way a captain might inspect a sinking ship. You know every weakness, every scar, every place where water or cold might get in. The door still sticks when you shut it. The roof sags slightly where a support log is aging faster than you'd like, but it's holding. You sit down by the fire and look up. The smoke leaves slowly, not perfectly. You'd fix it, but that would mean tearing apart the only wall that's behaving. Smoke in your lungs is bad, but cold in your lungs is worse. Some cabins back then had no fireplaces at all, just central fire pits with smoke drifting out through holes in the roof. You think about that sometimes when you cough in the night, about how they made it work, sleeping with their heads low, eyes watering, breath shallow. It wasn't comfort. It was desperation built into architecture. Night returns with little warning. The sky dims from grey to black without ceremony. The temperature drops again, sharply. You add another log, then two. You shouldn't. But tonight you're tired. Your bones ache. The air feels heavier than usual. You wrap yourself tight and lie down, listening. The cabin makes its usual noises. Timbers creaking, snow shifting, wind testing every seal like it's looking for an invitation. You close your eyes and picture your cabin from above. One tiny dot of warmth in a mountain that doesn't care about you. Just a little wooden heartbeat in a land of silence and snow. And somehow, for now, it's enough. The wind changes sometime before dawn. You don't hear it so much as feel it, an uneasy pressure shift that makes the cabin groan in unfamiliar ways. The logs complain, a low wooden mutter, and the roof sighs as if reconsidering its life choices. You wake with your heart already racing, breath shallow, convinced for a half second that something is wrong, something new. Then you realise what it is. The cold has found another way in. You sit up and scan the interior, eyes adjusting to the dim orange glow of the fire's last stand. The flames are still alive, but weaker than they should be. You hold your hand out, palm open, slowly rotating it. There, near the back wall, a thin, invisible knife of air slicing across your knuckles. You hiss quietly through your teeth. That gap wasn't there yesterday. Or maybe it was, and last night's wind just taught it how to speak louder. This is how winter wins. Not with a single dramatic blow, but with 1,000 tiny corrections to your optimism. You pull on your coat and crawl closer to the wall, pressing your ear to the logs. The wind whistles faintly, like someone breathing through their teeth. You wedge moss into the seam with your knife, then smear mud over it, working fast before it freezes solid. Your fingers burn, then go numb, then burn again. You've learned to ignore the cycle. Pain at least means sensation. Numbness is what scares you. By the time the gap is sealed, temporarily, you're breathing hard, more from effort than fear. You lean back against the opposite wall and let yourself rest for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Soot-stained spiderweb across the logs above, dark fingerprints of every fire you've kept alive in here. They're ugly, but they tell a story. This place has been warm before. Mountain men were obsessive about heat retention, sometimes to an extreme. There are accounts of men hanging extra hides over doors, stuffing cracks with spare clothing, even building secondary inner walls to create dead air space. Anything to slow heat loss. The concept of insulation existed long before the word did. They understood it the way you understand it now, by watching what happens when you don't have enough of it. You push yourself up and tend the fire again, feeding it carefully, one log at a time. The flames catch, licking higher, and warmth spreads slowly across the room. You hold your hands out, palms glowing red, and let out a long breath you didn't realize you were holding. This ritual, fire, hands, breath, is grounding, almost meditative. It's one of the few moments where the world shrinks to something manageable. As the light grows, you prepare for the day's real work. Today is about sealing, not improving, not expanding, just closing holes. You grab your supplies, mud bricks, moss, scraps of cloth, and begin a slow circuit of the cabin, inspecting every joint. You run your fingers along seams, feel for cold, watch your breath for sideways movement. It's meticulous, boring work, and it saves lives. There's a fringe detail buried in some trapper journals. A few men claimed they could tell the temperature outside just by listening to their cabin. The sharper the pops and cracks, the colder it was getting. They'd wake in the night and say, "It's dropping," without ever stepping outside. Scholars argue whether that's poetic exaggeration or genuine environmental awareness. After enough winters, you're not sure it matters. You're starting to believe it. Mid-morning brings a brief lull in the wind. You crack the door and step outside, squinting against the brightness. The snow is hard-packed now, crusted on top, dangerous to walk on. You test each step carefully. A twisted ankle out here isn't an inconvenience. It's a slow-motion disaster. You circle the cabin, checking the base where logs meet ground. Snow drifted high overnight, pressing cold directly into the lower walls. You shovel it away, knowing full well it will drift back by evening. This too is routine. Winter maintenance is never finished. It's only paused. Back inside, you hang another hide over the door, adding weight to help it. Seal. The cabin darkens slightly. You don't mind. Light leaks heat. That's the trade. You'd rather sit in shadow than shiver in sunshine. You eat a small meal, too small, and drink melted snow. Hunger is a constant background noise now, like tinnitus. You don't remember what full feels like, just varying degrees of less empty. Mountain men often talked about hunger the way sailors talked about the sea, always present, sometimes calm, sometimes trying to kill you. There's a historical argument about whether these men truly lived alone. Some evidence suggests winter camps were closer together than legends imply. That men visited each other, shared fires, traded food. Others insist isolation was real and frequent. Sitting here, alone with the wind scratching at your walls, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe company existed, but only if you were lucky enough to reach it. Afternoon fades into that flat, colourless light winter loves so much. You sit by the fire, mending a tear in your coat with clumsy stitches. Your hands aren't built for fine work anymore. They shake slightly, always. Cold does that. So does hunger. So does the quiet realization that no one is coming if things go wrong. The cabin holds steady through another round of wind. You listen, alert, cataloguing each sound. This crack is normal. That groan is old. That whistle, new but manageable. You respond, adjust, adapt. This conversation between you and the structure never really stops. Night arrives again, inevitable and early. You add wood and settle in, wrapped in layers, watching shadows dance along the walls. The cabin feels tighter now, smaller, but also safer. Every patch you added today makes a difference you can feel. You lie back and let your eyes close halfway. Sleep is shallow, always. You drift, then surface. then drift again. In the dark, the fire pops softly and the walls answer with gentle complaints. Outside, the mountain waits, patient as stone. You don't feel victorious, you feel tired. But tired is alive, and out here, alive, even exhausted, even cold, is enough to justify another night behind wooden walls that were never meant to be more than a temporary argument against winter. The wind is gone by morning. Not calmer, gone. The kind of silence that feels unnatural, like the mountains holding its breath. You wake up to a cabin so still it takes a moment to realise you're not dreaming. The fire's burned low again, coals pulsing under a thin layer of ash. The temperature feels flat. No draft, no sting. Just a deadened chill that settles on everything like dust. You sit up slowly, listening. The walls are quiet. The roof doesn't creak. Even your boots, when you pull them on, feel muffled, like the sound is being swallowed before it can echo. You crack the door and peek outside, and there it is. The truth. A thick fog has rolled in, so dense you can't see past the first row of trees. The snow has crusted over, untouched. There are no tracks, no wind-rippled drifts, no sign that anything alive has walked across this white for hours. You step outside, your breath curling up into the soup of air, and immediately feel it. It's colder than it looks. Fog in deep winter is a trap, a visual lullaby. It dulls the senses, hides danger, tricks you into thinking the worst has passed. But this kind of cold, the no wind, no noise kind, is often the most dangerous. Without wind to move the air, the temperature sinks and settles, pressing against the earth like a blanket made of knives. The snow doesn't crunch underfoot, it squeaks. That sharp, dry squeal that only happens when it's colder than 20 below. You retreat quickly, latch the door, and throw a few more logs onto the fire. You don't waste time today. This is a fire day. Not all winter days are equal. Some days are for hunting, others for wood cutting or mending. But days like this, the bitter, silent ones, are for one thing only: tending the fire. Because when it's this cold, the fire isn't just comfort. It's your partner, your guard, your proof of life. You crouch close, watching flames crawl around the logs. You know this fire. You've been feeding it for weeks, keeping it alive with the same care you'd give to a sick animal or a newborn. You've even talked to it, out loud, maybe more than once. You wouldn't be the first. Plenty of trapper journals, or when you can find them, mention conversations with their fires. My old friend, one called it. The only thing I trust out here. Another said he dreamed once that the fire whispered back, warning him about a bear that showed up 2 days later. Scholars call it cabin fever, loneliness, hallucination. But when the dark stretches 14 hours and the wind sounds like it knows your name, it's hard not to assign a little personality to the only warm thing in the room. Today's chore is simple. The fire must never die. You shift your bedding closer to the hearth. Stack your next 6 hours worth of logs nearby. Water, too. Boiled and set in a metal cup within reach. You don't want to walk more than a few feet from the flames. Even a trip outside feels unnecessary, and in this cold, unnecessary means risky. You spend the morning darning socks by firelight. You hate it. You're bad at it. Your stitches are crooked, thick, and the needle keeps slipping through your stiff fingers. But you do it anyway because doing nothing in winter is the slowest kind of dying. Idle hands may be the devil's tools, but in the mountains they're mostly just cold and useless. By noon, the fog outside thickens. You check for tracks again. Nothing. No rabbits. No fox. Not even a single bird darting between trees. It's like the forest has agreed to vanish for the day. You close the door, latch it tight, and lean your forehead against the wood. It's warm, faintly, from the fire behind you. Your breath fogs on the door. You whisper, "Thanks," to no one in particular. Back inside, you eat a small meal, again too small. Beans thinned with snowmelt. You chew slowly, savouring the illusion of fullness. You know better than to waste anything. Mountain men often used everything. Bones were boiled for broth, hides turned into clothing, fat rendered for light or cooking. Waste wasn't just careless, it was suicidal. You check your supplies. Not much left. You'll need to trap more soon, but not today. Today you stay warm, stay inside, stay alive. There's a stretch in the afternoon where the fog outside turns a strange shade of blue. You stare at it through the small window slit, watching it swirl like it's thinking. The stillness starts to get under your skin. The fire crackles, but even it seems quieter. You blink once, twice, then shake your head. You're tired, but not the kind sleep fixes. This is the part of winter where the mind starts to fray, where time gets weird. You find yourself repeating things, pacing without realizing it, laughing at nothing or jumping at small noises. Even the walls feel closer than they used to. Some mountain men didn't make it through winters because of the cold. Some didn't make it through because of what the cold did to their minds. One famous trapper, a man called Gideon Snow, spent an entire winter holed up in a cabin near the Bitterroots. When spring came, he wandered into a trading post with no shoes, missing 3 fingers, and carrying a pelt that didn't come from any animal they recognized. He couldn't speak, only whistle. Some say he went mad. Others say he just adapted too well. Scholars argue whether Gideon ever existed. But out here, in the quiet, you think about him more often than you'd like. Evening comes early. The fog fades but leaves behind an eerie calm. You can feel the temperature dropping again. You add wood to the fire, then more, watching the flames rise like a promise. The cabin groans once as the cold outside reasserts itself. You settle in, wrapped tight, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. You talk to the fire again, barely a whisper. Just enough to break the silence. Just enough to feel human. Outside, the snow waits. Inside, the fire burns. And for tonight, that's the line between life and whatever waits beyond it. You wake with numbers in your head. Not dreams, calculations. The fire is still alive, just barely. A thin orange line tracing the edge of survival. You feed it without thinking, hands moving automatically, and only then do you realise what dragged you out of sleep. It isn't the cold this time, it's the weight of arithmetic. Wood. You sit there, wrapped in furs, staring at the pile stacked along the wall. It looked respectable a week ago, even comforting. Now, in the weak morning light, it looks smaller, shrinking almost, as if it's been evaporating when you're not watching. This is the part of winter most people never imagine, the math. Not dramatic, not heroic, just relentless accounting. How many logs burned last night? How many hours did the fire last before you had to feed it again? How cold was it? How much colder will it get in January? You stand and walk to the pile, touching each log with your boot, counting quietly under your breath. 23, 24, 25. You stop at 37. That's what you've got inside. Outside, there's more, but outside wood is snow-buried, frozen and harder to burn. Inside, wood is precious. A rough rule floats back to you, something you heard years ago from an older trapper with frostbitten ears and a voice like gravel. 1 good log per hour when it's bad. 2 when it's real bad. You do the math again, slower this time. 37 logs inside. Maybe 60 more outside if you dig them out. That's not weeks, that's days. Your stomach tightens. Not hunger, not fear. Something colder. Realization. Mountain men didn't die because they forgot how cold winter was. They died because they misjudged how long it was. You pull on your coat and step outside. The air hits you hard, sharp enough to make your eyes water instantly. The fog is gone, replaced by brittle clarity. The sky's painfully blue, the kind that means the temperature has dropped even further overnight. The snow crunches and squeaks with every step, screaming cold. The woodpile sits half buried near the tree line. You dig with your hands at first, then with the shovel, breaking through crusted layers. Logs emerge like bones, rimed with frost, some fused together by ice. You haul one toward the cabin, muscles screaming, breath coming out in ragged bursts. You stop often. Sweat is still dangerous, even now. Especially now. This is the fuel math mountain men lived by. Not theoretical, physical. Every log represents calories burned to retrieve it, and calories saved when it burns. You're constantly balancing those 2 numbers, whether you want to or not. Work too hard, you starve faster. Work too little, you freeze. There's a historical argument about whether mountain men preferred hardwood or softwood in winter. Hardwoods like oak burned hotter and longer, but were harder to find at altitude. Softwoods like pine were abundant, but burned fast and smoky. Most men used whatever was closest, which meant pine, spruce, fir. Efficiency was a luxury. Availability was law. You drag another log free, cursing as it slips from your grip and slams into your shin. Pain flares, bright and immediate. You grit your teeth and wait, checking for blood. None. Just bruised. You nod to yourself, as if you passed some quiet test, and keep going. By midday, you've hauled in enough wood to make the pile look reassuring again. It's a lie, but a useful one. You stack the logs inside carefully, crossing them so air can circulate. Damp wood is almost as bad as no wood. You keep the driest pieces closest to the hearth, warming them slowly. Back outside, you look at the trees differently now, not as scenery, not as forest, as fuel. Each trunk is a number, each branch is time. You catch yourself doing the math automatically. That one's 3 nights, that one's half a day, that stand over there, maybe a week if I'm careful. This shift in thinking is subtle, but permanent. Mountain men talked about it in letters, when they talked at all, how trees stopped being trees, how animals stopped being animals. Everything became units of survival, calories, heat, hours. There's a strange, almost forbidden thought that creeps in as you work. If I don't burn it, it doesn't matter. The cabin, the gear, the plans, they all collapse without fire. Heat is the spine holding the whole thing upright. Without it, the rest is just clutter. You remember reading once, years ago back east, about a trapper who kept his fire burning for 97 straight days, slept in shifts, never let it go out. When asked why he didn't just relight it, he said, "Because matches run out before winter does." It sounded dramatic at the time. Out here it sounds like common sense. By afternoon, your hands shake from exertion and cold. You go inside and sit by the fire, feeding it slowly, methodically. One log. Wait. Another. You watch how the flames behave, how fast they eat the wood, how much heat they throw. You're learning its moods the way you'd learn a person's. There's a fringe belief some mountain men held that a fire could tell you things, that the way it popped or smoked or leaned meant something about the weather coming. A sudden flare meant wind, a sluggish burn meant snow. Scholars argue whether there's any truth to it or if it's just pattern-seeking in isolation. Sitting here watching the flames bend and whisper, you're not convinced it's nonsense. As evening approaches, the temperature drops again. You add more wood than you should. You know it. You feel a twinge of guilt as the flames rise higher, brighter. But tonight you want heat. Real heat. You want to feel it in your bones, even if it costs you later. You eat by firelight, staring at the pile of logs as if daring it to disappear. The cabin feels warmer, almost comfortable. Dangerous thoughts. Comfort leads to carelessness. Carelessness leads to waking up cold. Night settles in, dark and clear. The stars outside are sharp pinpricks of light, indifferent and beautiful. You latch the door, check the fire, then check it again. You arrange the logs so they'll burn slow while you rest. Lying back, you listen to the firework, chewing steadily through your future. Each crackle is an hour gone. Each glow is a small victory paid for in wood. You close your eyes and let the math fade for a while. Tomorrow you'll count again. You always do. Because out here, survival isn't about bravery or strength. It's about knowing exactly how much warmth you can afford, and spending it carefully, one log at a time. The cabin fills with smoke before you've even opened your eyes. Not enough to panic, but enough to cough. Enough to wake up fast, dragging cold air into your lungs with a gasp that hurts more than it helps. You sit up, waving your hand in front of your face, eyes watering. The fire is too hot. The damper's still half closed. The smoke, instead of rising up and out, is turning around, settling back down like an unwanted guest. You throw off the furs and stumble to the fireplace, squinting through the haze. You shift a log, open the flue fully and back away, coughing. The smoke hesitates, then finally obeys, funneling upward and out through the hole. In the roof you patched 3 times already. You lean against the wall, panting, and let your heart slow down. The cabin feels like a failed experiment in heat and air. Too hot to breathe, too cold to live without fire. This is the tightrope you walk every day. The line between warmth and suffocation is thinner than you'd think. Mountain men didn't die just from cold. Plenty of them died from fire, either from being burned alive when a spark caught their roof, or from breathing in too much smoke in a poorly ventilated cabin. The better the seal on your walls, the less air moves, and the less air moves, the faster it turns against you. You toss open the door to flush the smoke. A wave of freezing air crashes into the cabin like a bucket of ice. It feels clean and cruel all at once. You stand in the doorway, blinking into a world that's white again. More snow. Overnight it fell hard and heavy. It's stacked against the sides of the cabin like it's trying to bury you in stages. You shovel first, before food, before water. Because if the snow builds too high against your door, you might not open it next time. You dig out the entryway, carving a narrow trench that snakes into the clearing, waist deep in spots. The air is heavy, snow still drifting down in lazy spirals. It clings to your eyebrows, your gloves, the fur lining your hood. You feel like you're being erased one flake at a time. Inside again, you strip off your wet gloves and hang them near the hearth. The air's clearer now, but the cabin still smells like char and panic. You crouch by the fire and poke at the logs. They've settled into a steady orange rhythm. No more smoke, just quiet heat. You eat slowly, mechanically. Dried meat, a few bits of biscuit so hard you have to soak them in melted snow first. Your teeth ache with every bite. You remember when food had flavour. Now, it just has function. And always, there's the fire. You watch it like it might do something unexpected. Every spark, every flicker becomes a thing to analyse. Does it lean? Does it spit? Is it burning too fast? Too slow? You feel like a man with a wild animal in a cage. Beautiful, essential, and always one mistake away from turning on you. Historically, mountain men used all kinds of setups for their fires. Some built stone hearths from creek rock carefully placed to radiate heat. Others dug pits into the dirt, floor, and lined them with clay. A few even suspended pots from ceiling beams to cook while they slept, letting the rising heat warm their bodies as it boiled their stew. Ingenious, risky, not recommended for deep sleepers. There's a fringe belief, recorded in a couple of frontier journals, that certain types of smoke could heal winter sickness. Birch smoke especially. One man claimed he kept his lungs clear all season by breathing in the steam from burning pine sap mixed with spruce needles. Another smeared animal fat around the edges of his fire to keep spirits out. Were they superstitious? Definitely. Were they wrong? Hard to say. Most of them lived longer than expected. You consider trying the spruce needle trick, but you're too tired to collect anything today. Besides, you're still recovering from last night's fire math. You burned more than you should have, and the woodpile is once again concerning. You add cut more wood to the mental list that never ends. The cabin itself seems quieter than usual, not just from the muffled sound of new snow, but from within. The logs feel heavier, the air feels slower. You wonder if it's you, or if the structure's starting to settle deeper into the earth, as if winter is trying to pull it down with everything else. Midday passes unnoticed. You're inside all day now. The snow never stops. You mend a tear in your blanket, sharpen your knife, rewrap your hands with fresh cloth. The cold has cracked your skin in places, little red lines that sting when you rub them. Mountain men didn't have hand cream. They used tallow or bacon grease if they had it. You have neither. You spit in your palm and rub it in like it's medicine. By evening, the fire is steady again. It's better now, more controlled. You've relearned its mood after this morning's betrayal. You keep a pot of snow melting on the edge of the hearth, not for drinking, but for humidity. Without moisture in the air, your nose bleeds, your skin peels, your lungs feel like paper. It's one of the lesser-known killers in winter. Air so dry it quietly ruins your body from the inside out. As you sit there, staring at the flickering wall of firelight, you think about the ones who didn't make it. The stories aren't always told. Some just vanish. Their cabins are found empty, their gear still in place. A journal with half a sentence, a half-eaten meal, one chair knocked over, no sign of struggle. Just Silence. Some say it's the cold that got them. Others say something in the mind snapped. That after too many nights alone, something just breaks. That the fire stops looking like a tool and starts looking like an exit. You shift uncomfortably and toss another log on the flames. Not tonight. Tonight the fire burns clean. The air is sharp but breathable. The cabin holds, and you're still here. You lie back on your pile of furs, one hand stretched toward the warmth, and close your eyes slowly. The wind starts. Again outside, brushing against the cabin like a cautious animal. The logs groan in response. You whisper to the fire once, a wordless murmur, and it crackles back. Another night begins, and the fire, fickle, dangerous, miraculous, still agrees to stay. The cold wakes you before the fire does this time. Not the sharp, immediate kind, but a creeping chill that settles into your back, your hips, the places pressed longest against the earth. You open your eyes slowly, testing the air with a shallow breath. It's colder than it should be. Not dangerous yet, but trending the wrong way. You roll toward the hearth and peer through half-lidded eyes. The fire's still alive, but barely. A few glowing embers clinging stubbornly to existence. You feed them with care, splitting a log smaller than you'd like, rationing instinctively. The flame catches, weak at first, then steadier. You exhale, long and slow, the way you do when something almost goes wrong. That's becoming a habit. You sit up and pull your boots on, feeling the stiffness in your joints protest the movement. Outside, the world is still buried. Snow has piled higher along the cabin walls, and the light filtering through the window slit is dim and blue. The temperature has dropped again overnight. You can feel it in the way the logs sound. Tighter, sharper, more brittle. Today you deal with fabric, with fur, with the soft architecture that keeps heat where wood can't. You reach for your bundle of hides, beaver, deer, a fox you traded for months ago and have been saving like a luxury. They're stiff from cold, but still usable. Mountain men didn't think of furs as clothing alone. They were insulation, doors, curtains, wall coverings, flexible solutions in a rigid world. You hang one hide over the back wall, tacking it into place with crude wooden pegs. Immediately the cabin feels different. Not warmer exactly, but quieter. The wind's voice dulls. The cold loses one more path inward. You add another near the door, doubling it like a curtain. The doorway darkens, but the air stills. This is a historical fact often overlooked. Many cabins were lined with furs on the inside during winter. Not for decoration, for survival. A hide wall traps air, and trapped air is warmth you don't have to burn wood for. Some trappers even slept behind hanging hides, creating pocket-sized microclimates inside already tiny rooms. You test it by sitting still. The fire crackles softly. The air near the floor still bites, but higher up, near your chest. It's almost comfortable. Almost. You pull on your own layers next. Shirt, another shirt, wool, fur vest, coat. Then you stop. Too much clothing indoors is a trap. Sweat sneaks up on you, then freezes the moment you slow down. Mountain men learn to dress for stillness differently than movement. Indoors, lighter. Outdoors, layered like armour. There's an old argument among historians about whether mountain men wore too much fur. Some accounts say they overdressed constantly, sweating and freezing in cycles. Others suggest they were more disciplined, shedding layers whenever possible. You suspect the truth is simpler. People made mistakes, and winter punished them for it. You kneel by your bedding and rearrange it. Pine boughs fluffed, furs layered thicker on the bottom than the top. Insulation works best beneath you. Cold earth steals heat faster than cold air. Another thing you only learn by feeling it. Night after night. Mid-morning, you force yourself outside to check traps. The air hits you like glass. Your breath snaps out in sharp bursts. The snow is crusted again, holding your weight for half a step before breaking through. It's exhausting. You find one snare sprung, empty, another buried. No luck today. You don't linger. You've learned the difference between necessary suffering and pointless suffering. This is the latter. Back inside, you shake snow from your coat and hang it near the fire. Not close enough to scorch. You flex your fingers until sensation returns in waves of pins and needles. You hiss through your teeth, waiting it out. Frostbite doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. You spend the afternoon sewing, mending seams, adding fur cuffs to sleeves, tightening collars. Clothing here isn't about style or even comfort. It's about sealing openings. Wrists, ankles, neck. Every gap is a thief. There's a quirky note in one journal where a trapper claims he survived a brutal winter by wearing 2 hats at all times. One fur, one felt, because thoughts leak out of your head when it's cold. Silly maybe, but you pull your hat down tighter anyway. As daylight fades, the cabin feels more enclosed now, smaller, but the fire's heat lingers longer between feedings. You notice it without meaning to. That's progress. You eat slowly, staring at the hides on the walls. They ripple faintly when the fire shifts. You imagine them as a second skin for the cabin, a living thing wrapped around a living thing, both trying not to die. There's a scholarly debate about whether mountain men truly adapted to winter or merely endured it. Some argue they never stopped suffering, that survival was constant strain, never mastery. Others point to evidence of ingenuity, comfort even, in these adaptations. Sitting here, you think the answer might be both. You're not conquering winter, but you're learning its language. Night settles in. The wind returns, but it's muted now, dulled by fir and wood and snow. The cabin creaks, but softer. You add a log and wait, counting heartbeats until the heat spreads. You lie down, fully clothed, one hand resting on your chest, feeling it rise and fall. The firelight dances against the hides, shadows moving like slow animals. You watch them until your eyes grow heavy. Outside, the mountain remains vast and uncaring. Inside, you've carved out a pocket of resistance, not comfort, not safety, but something closer to control. Sleep comes in pieces. You drift, wake, drift again. Each time you surface, the fire is still there. The walls still hold, the hides still hang, and in a winter that measures success in inches and hours, that's enough. For now, your boots don't fit this morning. That's the first problem. You tug and twist and stomp your foot down, but something's changed overnight. Your socks aren't thicker, your feet aren't bigger. It's the boots. They've frozen into a different shape. The leather curled slightly, stiffened at the edges, and now your left foot feels like it's being wedged into a frozen cast. You curse softly, yanking it off. You hold the boot close to the fire, rotating it like a marshmallow, until the stiffness eases just enough to force it back on. Every motion sends a warning through your toes. Too cold, too fast. You stamp your feet, trying to get blood flowing. That tingling, fiery sting creeps in a few minutes later, followed by something more serious. A numb spot on your second toe that doesn't come back to life. You sit still for a moment, listening to your body, flexing your toes, waiting. The warmth creeps back eventually, but the message is clear. You're closer to losing something than you thought. Mountain men treated frostbite like a pest, something that crept in while you were busy doing other things. It didn't roar in like a bear, it whispered. Took a finger here, a toe there, and if you were lucky, that's all it took. The unlucky ones lost whole limbs, or life itself, one frozen part at a time. You add another log to the fire and peel your socks off. Your toes are red, mostly healthy, but that second one looks angrier than the rest. You rub it gently with your palm, then with the inside of your coat, trying to draw heat back in. You wrap your feet in a scrap of fur and sit there, bent over, firelight dancing on your face. This is the kind of moment no one paints into the legends. The part where you sit half naked in a smoky cabin, massaging your own stupid foot and muttering about choices. You make a mental note, stay inside today, or at least close to the cabin. You've gone soft, not in general, just in the feet. The real issue is that winter isn't even halfway through. You can feel it in your bones, in your calendar, in the angle of sunlight that never rises quite high enough anymore. Late December is barely the beginning, and your boots are already failing. You pull down your repair kit, an old tobacco tin filled with thick needles, waxed thread, and scraps of leather you salvaged months ago. You sit by the hearth and begin stitching. The hides stiff, your fingers clumsy from cold and overuse. Each push of the needle takes effort, and the thread creaks as you draw it through the seam. The smell of scorched leather lingers from where you held it too close to the fire earlier. Historically, mountain men didn't trust store-bought boots. Many wore handmade moccasins, layered with fur or thick wool. Some used 2 pairs, one for inside the cabin and another, more battered pair for outdoors. They weren't just clothing, they were tools, and tools got repaired constantly. There's a quirky fact buried in the journals of a Missouri River trapper. He once claimed he wore the same pair of moose-hide boots for 5 winters straight, patching them so often they ended up more patch than boot. He called them the second skin I made myself. Eventually he gave them a name, Louisa. No explanation. Some scholars scoff at stories like that. Others suggest that giving gear names was a way to fight loneliness. Out here, when nothing talks back, you start making characters out of things that don't leave. You glance at your boots and try not to think about naming them. Afternoon creeps in with little ceremony. The wind is low today, the trees barely shifting. You step outside briefly, checking your surroundings. The snow's packed high, glinting hard under the dim sun. No tracks, no movement. Even the birds have stopped pretending it's a normal day. Your traps are still buried, so you dig a few out, hands going stiff again within minutes. One trap has snapped shut around nothing, just snow. Another is still set. You reset the first and trudge back to the cabin, not even bothering to scan for game. They're holed up, same as you. Back inside, the warmth hits you with relief and a little guilt. You shouldn't like it this much. You know better. Liking the warmth leads to mistakes. Taking off a layer too soon. Skipping the nightly wood check. Sleeping too deep. Comfort is betrayal out here. You tend to the fire, then turn your attention to your indoor clothing. Mismatched layers. Some wool, some hide. All stitched with uneven hands. You reinforce a seam near your armpit and add an extra patch to your collar. Heat escapes from the throat first. Even inside, that little funnel of cold air slipping down your neck can undo hours of effort. This is where fur becomes architecture. Not just clothing or lining, but actual structure. You hang an old rabbit pelt over the window slit and tack 2 strips of foxhide around the hearth base, closing off gaps. It looks ridiculous. It looks like you're trying to decorate with roadkill, but the temperature drops 1 degree less at sunset, and that's all that matters. There's a weird superstition mentioned in an obscure account of a French-Canadian trapper. He swore by hanging raccoon tails over the fireplace to draw heat down. Totally unproven. Probably nonsense. But it crosses your mind as you stare at your pile of unused furs. You find a scrap and tack it to the corner of the mantel anyway. You feel silly, but also warmer. Evening falls in stages. The light fades, the sky darkens, and the fire takes over as the primary source of reality. Everything else fades into shadow. You move slower, less because of fatigue, more because speed costs warmth. You learn to move. Deliberately in winter, every trip across the room is like crossing a frozen street barefoot. You eat sparingly, boiled root vegetables and a scrap of venison so dried it's almost wood. You chew without tasting. It fills the gap. That's all it needs to do. You lie back eventually, wrapped in everything you own. The fire pops once, sending a brief light burst up the wall. You watch the shadow of your own hand flicker on the ceiling. Your boots sit near the hearth, steaming faintly. Your coat is folded under your knees. Your knife is within reach, and you're still alive. Your toe hurts. Your boots are falling apart. Your food is half gone. But the walls are holding. The fire is fed, and for another night, the cold is on the other side of the door. That's the deal you've made with winter. You keep fighting, one cracked seam, one burning log, 1 inch of warmth at a time, and in return, it just keeps not killing you. You dream of food and wake up angry about it. Not hungry, angry. The kind of irritation that sits behind your eyes and makes every small thing feel personal. The fire's low again, the cabin smells faintly of smoke and damp fur, and your stomach tightens the moment you're conscious. Hunger isn't new, but today it's louder, sharper. It's not asking politely anymore, it's demanding. You feed the fire first, always first. Then you sit there, staring at the pot hanging near the hearth, trying to decide what goes into it and what stays on the shelf. The math is cruel and repetitive. You've already done it 100 times, but you do it again anyway, hoping the numbers will change if you look at them differently. They don't. Food before snowfall was supposed to be enough. That was the plan. Dry meat, beans, cornmeal, a few roots, supplemented by traps. That was always the gamble. Supplemented. You weren't meant to live on stored food alone. Mountain men counted on winter hunting to bridge the gap. The problem is, winter doesn't always cooperate. You scoop a small handful of beans into the pot and add snow. Not enough to fill you, just enough to quiet the noise for a while. You let it simmer slowly, lid on tight to trap heat and moisture. Waste nothing. You scrape the sides with a stick to keep anything from sticking and burning. Burnt food isn't just unpleasant, it's calories lost to ash. As you wait, you check your traps again. The day outside is grey and brittle, the sky low and flat. Snow crunches loudly underfoot, the sound echoing too far in the still air. You move slower than you'd like, partly because of the cold, partly because of the ache that's settled into your hips and knees. That ache wasn't there in November. It's here now. Permanent, you suspect. The first snare is empty. The second, sprung. Your heart lifts despite yourself. You crouch, brush away snow, and your hope collapses into irritation. A rabbit. Small. Too small. Thin, even. Winter has been hard on everything. Not just you. Still, it's meat. You work carefully. Hands stiff. Movements practiced. Nothing wasted. The hide comes off cleanly. The bones go into a separate pouch. Those will become broth later. Thin, sad broth, but broth all the same. You hang the meat inside the cabin to dry near the fire, just enough to keep it from spoiling. You won't eat it all today. You can't afford to. Historically, mountain men ate constantly when they could. Feast or famine wasn't a saying, it was a schedule. When food was available, they ate until they couldn't move. When it wasn't, they endured. Fat was treasured. Lean meat filled your stomach but didn't keep you warm. That's why beaver tail was prized, why marrow was cracked and sucked clean, why grease was hoarded like gold. You don't have much fat left. There's a strange, unsettling clarity that comes with hunger. Your thoughts narrow. Everything becomes about food, heat, rest. Conversations you imagine having drift back to meals you remember. A stew back east. Bread that didn't crack your teeth. Apples. You shake your head, annoyed with yourself. Daydreaming burns calories too, in a way. Or at least it feels like it does. Inside, the cabin feels tighter than usual. Not physically, psychologically. Hunger does that. It shrinks the world. You sit by the fire and eat your beans slowly, forcing yourself to pause between bites. If you eat too fast, you'll still be hungry at the end. If you eat slow enough, sometimes your body forgets to complain for a while. There's an old debate among historians about just how hungry mountain men really were in winter. Some accounts exaggerate, written years later for dramatic effect. Others downplay it, written by men too proud to admit weakness. But archaeological evidence, emaciated remains, gnawed bones, worn teeth, suggests hunger was constant. Not starvation, always, but the threat of it. A presence, like cold. You lick the spoon clean and set it aside. The pot goes back on the hook with just enough broth left for later. You clean everything immediately. Leftover smells attract animals, even in deep winter, especially in deep winter. The afternoon stretches long and dull. You sharpen your knife again even though it doesn't need it. You check the fire again even though it's fine. You sit, stand, sit again. Hunger makes time strange. It slows it down, stretches it thin, then snaps it back when you're not expecting it. There's a fringe story you remember hearing about a trapper who claimed hunger sharpened his senses so much he could hear animals moving under snow, that he learned to listen with his stomach. Most scholars dismiss it as exaggeration. Sitting here, stomach hollow and alert, you're not so sure. You swear you hear something outside. A faint scrape, a shift. You hold still, breath shallow, listening. Nothing. You feel foolish and tired. As dusk approaches, you force yourself to prepare the rabbit. You cook a small portion, saving the rest. The smell fills the cabin, rich and almost painful. Your mouth waters immediately. You have to stop yourself from eating it all. You cut it into careful portions, wrap them, hang them out of reach. Self-control feels like a physical struggle. Your hands shake as you tie the knots. You eat your portion slowly, reverently. Every bite is a small relief. Not joy, relief. The ache in your stomach dulls. Your head clears slightly. You sit back, eyes closed for a moment, letting the warmth and food settle. This is another truth winter teaches. Food isn't pleasure anymore, it's medicine. Night comes down hard and fast. The temperature drops again. You add wood to the fire, then sit closer than usual. The cabin responds with its familiar noises, but you notice them less tonight. Hunger has pushed everything else into the background. You lie down early, not because you're tired, but because sleep is the one place hunger quiets completely. You arrange your furs carefully, tuck the edges in tight, block drafts with your boots and spare clothing. You check the fire one last time, then check it again. As you settle in, your stomach growls softly, one last complaint before it gives up for the night. You rest a hand over it, feeling the slow rise and fall of your breath. Outside, the mountain holds its silence. Inside, the fire glows, steady and patient. Tomorrow, you'll check traps again. Tomorrow you'll cut wood, ration food, do the math all over again. Tomorrow is another negotiation. But tonight, you've eaten. Tonight, the fire burns. Tonight, hunger has been answered. Just enough. And in a winter that takes more than it gives, just enough is still a victory. You wake up counting, not sheep, not dreams, calories. It's automatic now. Your eyes barely open, and already your brain's running numbers. How many beans you have left, how many traps you've set, how long a rabbit stretches when dried just right. You roll over onto your side and stare at the dull ceiling logs overhead, smoke-stained and steady, thinking about fat. Not in a dreamy bacon sizzling on a skillet way, just fat. The math of it, the energy it holds, the way it warms you when nothing else can. You sit up, slower than usual. Your joints protest, especially your knees. You stretch your legs, and they creak like old cabin doors. The cold has stiffened everything inside you, including your appetite, which now works more like a warning system than a hunger cue. You chew a thin piece of dried meat. Elk, maybe. Could be deer. Hard to say anymore. Is dry enough that your teeth protest. You suck on it more than chew it, letting the salt and protein hit your bloodstream slow. You stretch the moment out, dragging it for as long as it'll go. Then you run the numbers again. You have not enough. There's this deep, aching truth you learn out here. Calories aren't just fuel, they're time. A full belly buys you hours of strength. Half a belly gets you. Through half a task. No belly. That's where mistakes start to bloom. Mountain men, the legends go, were always lean and scrappy. But journals tell a rougher tale. Starvation wasn't heroic. It was humiliating. There are letters with lines like, "I chewed leather for 2 days," or "ate my soap, wouldn't recommend it." One trapper wrote, "Watched a squirrel eat bark and wondered what he knew that I didn't." Hunger makes philosophers of desperate men. You wrap your scarf tighter, then crack open the door to check the sky. Grey, heavy, flat as old pewter. No sun, no movement. A cold that doesn't announce itself, just waits for you to forget how dangerous it is. Your traps are overdue. You check them anyway. You move slow, deliberately slow. Every step is a negotiation between need and energy. The snow has hardened into a brittle crust, sharp at the edges. You shift your weight with each step to avoid breaking through. You fail more often than not. The first trap is undisturbed. The second is gone. Just the base of the snare, twisted, half buried in snow. You scan the ground, find a few tracks, something struggled, maybe got free, or maybe something else got there first. Scavengers don't wait their turn in winter. You reset the trap, fingers numb and clumsy. The wire bites at your skin. You barely notice. You move on, check the others. Nothing. Not even a bird. The forest is too quiet again. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's suspicious. By midday, you're back in the cabin, stamping snow off your boots, rubbing your hands to life. Your shoulders ache from tensing against the cold. You don't even remember doing it. Your whole body's bracing for something now. Maybe the long hunger. Maybe the final cold. Inside, the fire burns low. You feed it slowly, not because you're conserving wood, but because it feels wasteful to warm a body that isn't earning it. You hate that thought. You hate that you've started assigning value to your own warmth. You boil the rabbit bones left from earlier in the week. It's the third boil. They're nearly dust, but you force something out of them. The water tastes like memory. You sip it slowly and feel marginally more alive. There's a disturbing precision to hunger once it sticks around long enough. You know exactly how many hours ago you ate. You know what's in your stomach. You know how far it'll take you. It's like being strapped to an hourglass that leaks from your ribs. You open your food sack again. Beans, a few strips of meat, a small pouch of lard you've been saving. You pull it out, open it, and stare. It's stiff, off-white, smells faintly rancid. But it's energy. Raw, high-value energy. The kind you dream of when you're out of options. You dip your finger in and smear a bit on bread so stale it crumbles when you touch it. You eat the whole thing slowly, eyes closed, imagining butter, then cheese, then pie. You stop. Imagination costs energy too. There's a historical fact you try not to think about too much. The average trapper during peak winter burned between 4,000 and 6,000 calories a day. You'd be lucky to hit half of that with your current intake. You're running on fumes and your body knows it. You've already started cannibalizing your own fat reserves. The visible signs are there. Hollow cheeks, looser clothes, that sagging feeling when you move like your limbs are slowly emptying. You think about your ribs. You don't need a mirror to know they've started showing. You can feel them at night when you lie on your side and your own bones press against the ground like scaffolding. You sit near the fire and wrap your arms around your knees. You let your chin rest on them. The room smells like smoke and fur and broth that doesn't taste like anything. You can hear the wind testing the door again, but it's not the wind that worries you anymore. It's the quiet between. You try to read from your old journal, but your eyes blur. You try to stitch a hole in your glove, but your fingers won't behave. You lie back instead, listening to your heartbeat. Slow, low, steady like a drum in another room. Sleep comes in short, hard bursts now. You wake up gasping sometimes, like your body's not sure what's missing. Oxygen or sugar or just the will to continue. You take deep breaths, slow them down, and stare at the fire again. There's one log left near the hearth. The others are across the room. You stare at it, calculating when to use it. Not now, later, tonight. It'll buy you 6 hours, maybe 7 if you bank the coals right. You add bark to the fire instead. It burns fast and shallow, but it helps. Kindling flame is better than nothing. Outside, the snow begins again. You hear it, soft and steady, the sound of time passing. Another layer between you and rescue, or you and the end. You close your eyes, not because you're sleepy, but because it's easier than staring at food you don't have, and you wait. Because that's what hunger is, in the end. A long, patient waiting for the trap to snap or spring to come, whichever arrives first. The darkness presses in earlier now, not just because the days are short, but because your mind is tired of holding the edges apart. You wake and sleep in fragments, never fully sure which side of the line you're on. Time has started to smear. Morning and evening feel less like opposites, and more like different shades of the same long, cold thought. You notice it first when you forget what day it is. Not the number, that's been gone for weeks, but even the sense of sequence. Yesterday feels identical to the day before, and tomorrow already feels used up. You sit up by the fire and try to recall something specific you did 2 days ago. You can't. Everything blurs into tending flames, checking traps, counting food, listening to the walls breathe. This is the snowed-in psychology no one warned you about. Physically, you're still functioning. Barely. Mentally, something has shifted. The cabin feels smaller than it did last week, the ceiling lower, the walls closer. When the fire pops unexpectedly, you jump harder than you should. When it goes quiet, your chest tightens. Silence has become suspicious. Noise has become threatening. There's no comfortable middle ground anymore. You stand and pace the length of the cabin, 3 steps there, 3 steps back. You don't mean to. You only realise you're doing it when you wear a shallow groove into the dirt floor. You stop, embarrassed, as if someone might be watching. There isn't. That's the problem. Isolation doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives disguised as routine. Mountain men wrote about this more than people expect. Not always directly, but in odd ways. One journal shifts midwinter from careful observations to rambling lists of words. Another repeats the same paragraph 3 times with minor changes. Scholars debate whether these are signs of boredom, exhaustion, or something closer to dissociation. Out here you don't care what it's called, you just know it's happening. You sit down and stare at the fire, watching the flames fold in on themselves. For a moment, just a moment, you think you hear someone speak. Not clearly, just the shape of a voice. You snap your head up, heart pounding, scanning the room. Nothing. You exhale sharply and rub your face with both hands. This is how it starts, you think. This is how stories begin. You force a small laugh, the sound thin and strange in the enclosed space. Get it together, you mutter aloud, because silence feels worse than sounding foolish. Talking to yourself becomes normal faster than you'd like. Outside, the light fades into a dull blue-grey, then disappears altogether. Snow drifts lazily past the window slit. You watch it longer than necessary, mesmerised by the way it falls without urgency, without care. You envy it briefly. Then you hate yourself for that thought. You try to give the evening structure. You clean your tools, again. You count your food, again. You rearrange your woodpile even though it doesn't change the total. These rituals aren't about efficiency anymore. They're anchors. Without them, the night stretches too wide, too empty. There's a fringe theory some historians float that mountain men intentionally created routines not for survival, but for sanity. That strict schedules, fire tending at set hours, meals at the same time each day, journal writing even when nothing happened, were defences against mental collapse. It makes sense. Your body can endure hunger and cold longer than your mind can endure meaninglessness. You decide to write. The journal feels heavier in your hands than it should. You flip it open and stare at the page. The last entry is short, practical, no emotion. You realise you've been avoiding that, avoiding putting words to what's happening because once it's written, it's real. You start anyway. You write about the snow, about the fire, about the rabbit that barely fed you. You write about your boots falling apart and your toe that still aches at night. You don't write about the voice you thought you heard. Not yet. You draw a small line in the margin instead, a meaningless mark just to fill the space. When you stop, your hand hurts. You hadn't noticed how hard you were gripping the pencil. You set the journal aside and sit back, staring into the room. The firelight throws shadows that stretch and bend along the walls. One of them looks like a person standing just outside your vision. You turn quickly. Nothing. You force yourself to breathe slower, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The way you learned years ago during a panic you never admitted was panic. You remind yourself of facts. You are alone. You have been alone for weeks. Nothing new has entered the cabin. Facts help. Sometimes, dinner is small and unsatisfying. You eat it anyway, because skipping meals makes your thoughts worse. That's another thing you've learned. Hunger sharpens the edges of fear. You need the calories not just for heat, but for clarity. As night settles, the cabin begins its familiar sounds. Wood contracting, snow sliding from the roof, the fire shifting as it consumes another sliver of your future. You listen carefully, cataloguing each noise. Normal, normal, normal. This one. New? No. Just the wind finding a different angle. You lie down earlier than usual, not because you're tired, but because being horizontal makes the room feel larger. The ceiling retreats a little. Your chest loosens. You pull the furs up to your chin and stare at the dim glow of the fire. Your thoughts drift, unanchored. You think about people you haven't seen in years. You imagine conversations that would never happen. You replay arguments, rewrite them with better lines. At one point you realise you've been silently mouthing words, carrying on a conversation with no one. You stop and swallow. Some mountain men believed winter isolation could permanently change a person. That men who came out in spring were quieter, more distant, less interested in crowds. Others believed the opposite, that isolation stripped away pretense and left people sharper, more focused. Scholars still debate it. You suspect both can be true depending on what you lose along the way. The fire burns low. You debate adding another log. You don't need it yet, but you want it. Want is dangerous. You compromise, sliding in a smaller piece, watching the flame respond gratefully. As you settle back, your eyelids grow heavy. Sleep takes you in uneven waves. You dream of voices just out of reach, of knocking you never answer. You wake once with your heart racing, convinced someone is outside the door. You lie still, listening, only wind, only snow. Eventually exhaustion wins. Your breathing slows. The cabin holds. The fire glows. Tomorrow you'll wake and do it all again, counting, fixing, waiting. And if your mind frays a little more each day, well, winter has a way of taking payment in parts. You don't open your eyes at first. You just listen. The cabin is humming. Not literally, but close. There's a tension in the air that wasn't there yesterday. A new kind of stillness. The fire has burned low, but the embers still pulse faintly, like a dying heartbeat under ash. You lie still, wrapped in layers. Not cold yet, not warm either. Just balanced. Just suspended in the strange middle. Then it comes again. A pop, sharp and sudden. Not the fire. You freeze, eyes now open, staring at the low ceiling. Another pop. Then a crack. Not loud, but specific. The kind of sound you don't mishear once you've lived in a wooden box long enough to learn its language. Something shifted. You sit up slowly, furs sliding off your shoulders, breath fogging in the air. The temperature has dropped again. That much is clear. The kind of drop that makes everything shrink. Wood, sinew, even thoughts. You rub your arms and step over to the hearth, coaxing the fire back to life with a careful hand. The warmth creeps out cautiously, like a cat not entirely sure it's welcome. Another crack, this time from the far wall. You hold still, listening. Cabin sounds are normal. Wood expands, contracts, groans under snow load, sings softly when wind rubs against chinking. But you've learned to hear the difference between normal and new, and this isn't normal, not quite. You walk the perimeter slowly, hands out, palms grazing the logs. You feel a faint vibration in the north wall, a new seam, a hairline crack forming where the moisture froze and pushed just enough to split. You curse softly, more from habit than urgency. It's not an emergency. Not yet. But it's another thing added to the list of things trying to break through. You step outside, boots crunching on crusted snow. The sun's up, but only technically. The sky's a low sheet of grey, thick and indifferent. Snow has piled again, not from a storm, just from the accumulation of quiet days. There's something threatening in how gentle it all looks. The danger here isn't violence, it's weight. Relentless, slow-building weight. You scan the roof, noting the sag near the eastern edge. A log up there is starting to bow. Nothing dramatic, but the signal is there. You'll have to shovel today, like it or not. As you dig, you hear the pops more clearly. Each one echoes through the snowpack, like the cabin itself is gritting its teeth. The roof groans when you step up, but it holds. You move slowly, pushing snow down in wide arcs, watching it tumble and vanish into the white abyss around the base. Every movement sends a cascade, every shovelful light and then suddenly heavy in your arms. Mountain men knew this rhythm intimately. Snow falls, snow piles, roofs creak, you climb, you dig. If you're lucky, nothing collapses. If you're not, well, the stories are rare, but they exist. Cabins caving in during a heavy freeze, men buried inside. No one finds them until spring when the thaw exposes the quiet. Inside again, you strip off your outer layer and crouch near the fire. You rest your hands on the hearthstone and close your eyes. The heat from the stone is honest, earned. You want to press your face to it, just to feel something warm and solid against your skin. You resist. You grab the pot and melt snow for water. The scrape of the metal against the stones is a sound you now associate with hope, not joy, just anticipation. Steam rises slowly. You lean in. The smell of smoke and metal fills your nose. It smells like the opposite of hunger. You eat something small, again. Beans mostly, with some of the last of your dried meat. The broth is too thin to really do anything, but it tricks your stomach into feeling like you tried. You sit with the bowl in your lap long after it's empty. Outside, something shifts again. A long, slow groan from the forest. Could be a tree cracking under ice. Could be the mountain exhaling. You listen anyway. Always. That afternoon the cabin settles even more. The north wall now makes regular sounds. Soft creaks, spaced minutes apart. You shore it up with a second beam, wedging a log between floor and wall, adding tension in the opposite direction. It won't fix anything long term, but it'll slow the problem. That's the winter strategy. Not fixing, just delaying collapse. You touch the chinking near the floor and feel a thin breeze. The gap has widened. You pack it tighter with a fresh mix of mud and moss, smearing it with a stick because your hands are too cold to manage the finer work. Historically, mountain men didn't expect their cabins to be perfect. They just had to be more solid than the weather. That was one trapper's phrase. It stuck with you. He didn't say safe or warm, just more solid than the weather. Like the weather was a living thing, a rival, a beast outside that pressed every day just a little harder against your walls, waiting for something to give. Evening comes fast again. You check the logs, count what's left. Still not enough. You'll need to cut more in 2 days. Maybe 1 if the cold keeps pulling at your coattails like this. You sit by the fire and listen to the sounds. Tonight the cabin is louder than usual. The wall keeps speaking. A new pop near the roof. A shifting creak above the door. It's like living inside an old throat clearing itself. There's a quirky bit from a fur trapper's diary you remember reading. He claimed that at a certain point in winter he could hear the snow thinking. Most folks dismissed it as poetic rambling. You're not so sure anymore. You've heard snow make decisions. You've heard the shift, the weight redistribution, the long quiet before something gives. You lie down early, not because you're tired, but because you want to be horizontal if anything happens. You position yourself with a clear line to the door. You keep your boots nearby. You keep your knife under the furs, just in case. Not of wolves, not of bears, of collapse. The fire burns low. You feed it again, even though you shouldn't. You need the warmth tonight. The cabin isn't reliable today, and your body knows it. You stare at the ceiling, watching shadows stretch and sway like breath made visible. Every flicker feels like motion. Every creak is a question. You whisper to yourself without meaning to, hold, just a little longer. And the cabin groans back, undecided. You wake up feverish, and that's how you know something's wrong. Not dramatic fever, no shaking chills or burning skin, but a slow, creeping heat behind the eyes, a heaviness in your limbs that makes even sitting up feel like work. Your throat is dry, your head dull. The fire is still alive, but it feels farther away than usual, like warmth has decided to keep its distance today. You test yourself quietly. Wiggle fingers, toes, stand up. Everything works, but slower, sloppier. Your balance is off just enough to notice. That's the dangerous part. Illness in winter doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in while you're already weakened, already hungry, already cold. You sit back down and breathe carefully, listening to your body like it's a stranger whose intentions you don't trust. Mountain men feared sickness more than storms. A broken leg could be splinted. Hunger could be endured. Cold could be negotiated with fire and fur. But illness took away your ability to do anything. And doing things was how you stayed alive. You feel your forehead with the back of your hand. Warm, not alarming. Yet. You swallow and wince. Your throat aches faintly. Smoke irritation, maybe. Or the start of something worse. Out here, there's no difference between a mild illness and a fatal one until it's too late to matter. You boil water immediately. Not snow this time. Actual water from your last jug, saved for moments like this. You add a handful of dried spruce needles, something you learned from an older trapper years ago. Vitamin C, he claimed. Keeps the teeth in and the death out. You don't know if that's true. Scholars still debate how effective these remedies really were, but doing something feels better than waiting. The tea tastes sharp and bitter. You sip it slowly, letting the steam hit your face. You wrap your coat tighter and sit as close to the fire as you dare without risking smoke again. Your head throbs in time with your heartbeat. You count the beats, partly to distract yourself, partly to make sure they're still steady. There's a journal entry you remember reading where a trapper described being sick alone in winter as lying next to your own grave and wondering if it's warm enough. It felt melodramatic when you first heard it. Now it feels accurate. You force yourself to eat a little, even though your stomach protests. Calories are medicine now. You chew slowly, pausing between bites, fighting the urge to stop. If you don't eat, you'll get weaker. If you get weaker, you won't be able to keep the fire alive. Everything connects back to that same fragile chain. The cabin feels different today. Not threatening, indifferent. The walls don't creak as much. The wind is quieter. It's like the world has stepped back to watch and see what you'll do. You lie down for a while, head propped slightly, not wanting to sleep too deeply. Fever dreams can pull you under fast. You've heard stories, men waking up convinced they were warm, stepping outside into snow barefoot, never coming back. Whether those stories are exaggerated or not, the warning sticks. You talk to yourself out loud again, just to stay anchored. You narrate what you're doing. I'm drinking. I'm breathing. I'm awake. Your voice sounds thin, unfamiliar. You don't like it. By afternoon, the fever hasn't worsened, but it hasn't left either. It's sitting there, patient. You change damp clothes for dry ones, even though it costs you energy. Wet fabric steals heat faster than anything. You've learned that lesson too many times to ignore it now. You inspect your hands and feet for signs of frostbite. Pale patches, waxy skin. Everything looks okay. That's a relief you don't celebrate. You've learned not to. Historically, mountain men treated illness with whatever they had. Herbs, steam, fat, whiskey when available. Some remedies helped. Some did nothing. A few made things worse. Scholars still argue how much traditional knowledge actually extended lives versus simply providing comfort. Sitting here, wrapped in furs, sipping bitter tea, you decide comfort counts for something. As evening approaches, your head clears slightly. Not much, but enough to feel like progress. You feed the fire carefully, keeping it steady rather than hot. Too much heat can worsen dehydration. Another calculation added to the pile. You eat a small meal and manage to keep it down. You consider that a victory. You clean the bowl immediately, then sit quietly, listening to the cabin breathe. The north wall pops once, then settles. You ignore it. Tonight, you don't have the energy to fight everything. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. The shadows don't bother you as much tonight. Maybe your mind is too tired to invent anything extra. Maybe the fever has burned off some of the edge. You focus on slow breathing, on the fire's rhythm. You remind yourself of something important. Most illnesses passed, even out here. Not all of them, but many. You only need to outlast this one, the way you outlast the cold, 1 hour at a time. Sleep comes unevenly. You wake often, checking the fire, checking your body, checking that you're still yourself. Each time the cabin is still there. The fire still glows. Your breath still fogs the air. Outside, winter waits, unmoved by your condition. Inside, you do what mountain men always did when sickness came knocking in the dead of winter. You stay put, stay warm, and hope your body remembers how to fight. You dream of water, clear, cold, running over rocks, not frozen, not boiled, not ladled from a crusted pile of snow and tasted through smoke and ash. Just clean, crisp water, rising up in your mind like a memory from someone else's life. You dream of dipping your hands in, drinking until your stomach hurts, washing your face, letting the cold sting your cheeks in a good way. You dream of listening to it run, and then you wake up thirsty enough to think the dream was a warning. Your mouth is dry, tongue sticking to your teeth, throat rasping like you inhaled a handful of pine needles. The fever's broken, or maybe it just stepped back for a moment, but the thirst is worse now. You sit up, light-headed, and glance toward the fire. It's low, but alive. A small mercy. You drag yourself up, joints stiff, and put on your coat. It's harder to move today. Your muscles feel thick and slow, as if they've been packed in snow along with everything else. You grab your tin pot and a ladle and step outside, blinking hard against the sharp glare of snow under the early morning light. The cold stings today. Not a burn, more like a slap. The kind of cold that reminds you you're not better yet. You breathe carefully through your scarf and trudge to the edge of the clearing. You've been melting snow for weeks, but now the pile by the cabin is crusted with ash and debris. It'll still work, but it's harder to pretend it's anything but survival runoff. You dig through it anyway, collecting a pot full of relatively clean snow, then turn to make the slow walk back. It's funny, in a dry sort of way. You're surrounded by water in its frozen form, and yet staying hydrated is a constant chore. Melting snow takes time, it takes fire, it takes the patience to wait for steam before you drink, and the discipline to let it cool enough not to burn your tongue in your desperation. Mountain men learned quickly that snow wasn't the same as water. It tricked you. You could eat handfuls and still be dehydrated. You could work yourself to exhaustion collecting it and still come up short. More than one man died not from thirst, exactly, but from mismanaging the distance between snow and drink. Inside, you set the pot on the hearth and crouch beside it, watching steam rise. It feels like hope in vapour form. You breathe it in, eyes closed. The warmth coats your face, dampens your skin, eases the tightness behind your forehead. You whisper, "Thank you," to no one in particular. When the water's ready, you sip it carefully. You don't gulp. Gulping gets you sick, bloated, nauseous. You've made that mistake already. You drink in measured pulls, letting each swallow settle. It helps. Not immediately, but noticeably. Your head clears a little. Your hands feel steadier. You boil another pot. Right away. You're behind on fluids, and you can feel it in the stiffness of your limbs and the way your thoughts drag like wet boots through mud. The worst part is, you almost didn't notice. Thirst sneaks up on you like a lazy thief. Quiet, patient, waiting for distraction. There's a fringe fact tucked away in some old trapper records. Some men carried ice chips in cloth, letting it melt slowly in their mouths while they worked. It was inefficient, but safer than eating snow outright. Others dug into creeks under the ice, using axes or even bullets to punch holes through to moving water. If they were lucky, the flow hadn't frozen solid. You wonder what luck even feels like anymore. You check your creek today just to know. The short walk there is a cold commitment. You wear all your layers, scarf wrapped tight, boots laced hard. The snow comes up to your thighs in places, powdery and loose beneath a thin crust. Each step is work. Each breath burns. The creek is, predictably, frozen solid on top. You chip away at it with your hatchet, knocking off chunks until your arms ache. It takes 10 minutes to get through 2 inches of ice. Beneath it, black water stirs. A slow pulse of life hiding under winter's mask. You drop to your knees and scoop a little into your flask, then fill a small jug. It's not much, but it tastes better than melted snow. Clearer, like something real. You take it back with care, stepping slowly. One fall out here with a full container could erase an hour of labour. You talk to yourself while you walk, just to hear a voice. Don't spill it. Don't spill it. Just walk. Don't fall. Inside, you pour the water into your pot and set it by the fire, not to boil, just to warm. Cold water in a cold belly is like a stone thrown into a frozen pond. Too much shock. You've learned your body's limits in ways you never expected. A healthy person drinks when they're thirsty. You drink by strategy now. Historically, this was one of the more underestimated survival challenges. People forget how much water a person really needs, even when they're not sweating, even when they're just enduring. A man could live weeks on a little food. But without enough water, those weeks turn to days fast. You sit near the fire and sip again. Your hands are warmer now, your legs stretched toward the hearth. The fever's in retreat, but you're not confident enough to celebrate. You're aware of how narrow the margin still is. Later, you write a short note in your journal. Water from the creek, deep enough to move, clean enough to taste. I remember rivers. That last part hits unexpectedly hard. You do remember rivers. Long, loud, endless things. Places where you could drink freely without calculation. Where water wasn't something you worked for. You close the journal and lean back, eyes drifting to the roof. A small icicle dangles just inside the flue, catching firelight. It'll melt soon and vanish into the stones. You wonder if anyone ever drowned in snow. Not buried, drowned. Surrounded by water in the wrong form, unable to access it until it's too late. It sounds ridiculous. But out here, so does everything else. Evening comes again, slow and cold. You drink one last mugful before bed. You pile extra snow near the hearth to melt passively overnight. You lie back down, not sick, but not well, somewhere in between. But you're hydrated, and you're warm, and the fire burns steady. Tonight, that's enough. You hear it before you see it. A low, deliberate crunch in the snow, not wind, not settling. Footsteps, measured, heavy, unhurried. You freeze mid-motion, one hand wrapped around your tin cup, the other hovering near the fire as if heat alone might explain the sound away. Crunch, pause, crunch. Your chest tightens. Predators move like this when they're curious, not hunting. When they're deciding. You don't rush for your rifle. Not yet. You've learned that panic wastes more energy than action. Instead, you sit very still and listen, mapping the sound against the cabin's thin walls. The steps circle wide at first, keeping distance. Testing. Whatever it is, it knows you're here. Smoke gives you away every time. This is winter territory. You just happen to be borrowing it. You rise slowly and peer through the narrow window slit, brushing frost from the hide covering. At first, you see nothing but white and shadow. Then movement. A pale shape gliding between trees. A wolf. Just one. Large, thick-coated, ribs hidden under winter fur. Its head lifts, nose testing the air. It's not starving yet. That's what worries you. Starving predators rush. This one is patient. You let the hide fall back into place and step away from the wall. Wolves don't usually bother cabins, not unless something's wrong. Or unless they've learned something new. You grab a stick from the woodpile and toss it into the fire. Sparks leap up, snapping. Noise helps. Fire helps more. Mountain men shared space with predators constantly. Wolves, cougars, bears that hadn't yet gone to ground. Most encounters never made it into stories because nothing happened. The animals watched. The men watched back. And both sides decided the math wasn't worth it. But winter changes that math. You crack the door just enough to step onto the threshold, rifle in hand but lowered. The wolf has stopped now, standing still at the edge of the clearing. It looks at you, not with fear, not with aggression, with assessment. You meet its gaze, feeling something old and uncomfortable stir in your chest. Recognition, maybe. Two creatures burning energy in a world that offers very little back. You shout. Not words, just sound. Loud. Sudden. The wolf flinches, ears flattening. It hesitates, then backs away, melting into the trees without drama. No charge, no standoff, just a decision made and acted on. You stand there longer than necessary, scanning the forest. Wolves travel in, packs, but scouts often move alone. You listen for more steps, none come. Back inside, you latch the door and sit heavily by the fire. Your heart takes a while to settle. You didn't feel fear exactly. More like competition. A shared understanding that winter doesn't leave room for weakness. Later that afternoon, you find fresh tracks near your trap line. Smaller ones too. Fox, maybe. Signs of life returning cautiously after days of silence. That's good and dangerous. Where prey moves, predators follow, including the two-legged kind. You haven't seen another human in months, but you know they're out there. Other trappers, maybe. Hunters. Men who didn't plan well enough and are now drifting between camps, burning through favours and patience. Most encounters are neutral. Some are friendly. A few turn ugly when resources run thin. There's an old debate among historians about how isolated mountain men really were. Some evidence suggests winter camps clustered loosely, men visiting each other to trade food or company. Other accounts paint a lonelier picture, men seeing no one for an entire season. You suspect both are true. It depended on luck, and geography, and timing. You check your rifle again, cleaning the barrel with slow, practiced movements. Ammunition is precious. You don't fire warning shots unless you have to. Noise attracts attention you may not want. As dusk approaches, you hear another sound. Lighter this time. Scratching near the base of the cabin. You tense again, then relax slightly. Smaller animal. Probably a fox drawn by cooking smells. Or a porcupine. They'll chew anything salty, including your door if you let them. You tap the wall sharply with the butt of your knife. The scratching stops. After a moment, you hear retreating steps. You exhale. Animals aren't villains out here. They're neighbours, competitors, sometimes food, sometimes threats. The relationship is practical, not emotional. You don't hate the wolf for being hungry any more than you hate yourself for wanting to survive. You add more wood to the fire and sit back thinking about how thin the line is between you and everything else alive out there. No walls, no laws, just behaviour and consequence. There's a strange, fringe belief you once heard from a half-drunk trapper at a rendezvous that wolves could sense sickness, that they knew when a man was weak and waited him out like weather. Scholars dismiss it as myth. But after being ill, after feeling your body slow down, you can't entirely shake the thought. Predators notice weakness because weakness changes how you move, how you smell, how you sound. You resolve to move deliberately tomorrow, to show the forest you're still part of the conversation. Night falls again, thick and starless. The fire crackles steadily, throwing light against fur-lined walls. Outside you hear distant howls, far enough to be safe, close enough to remind you of the hierarchy you're living inside. You lie down with your rifle nearby, not because you expect trouble tonight, but because expectation itself has become part of survival. You listen as the cabin settles, as the wind moves through branches, as something large shifts weight somewhere beyond sight. Sleep comes cautiously, in pieces. Each time you drift, you carry the image of the wolf's eyes with you. Calm, calculating, alive. In the morning you'll check the traps again. You'll cut wood. You'll melt snow and drink carefully and count what's left. And the forest will keep watching. Out here, you're never truly alone. You're just one of the quieter animals trying to make it through the winter without becoming someone else's solution. Morning feels different today. Not warmer, not brighter, just less empty. You notice it the moment you wake. The cabin still creaks. The fire still needs feeding. Your body still aches in familiar places, but there's a faint sense of presence lingering in the air like a room someone just left. You sit up slowly and listen. No footsteps, no scratching. Just the soft hiss of embers and the distant sigh of wind moving through trees. Still, the feeling doesn't go away. It settles somewhere behind your ribs, not fear exactly. Awareness, isolation, your learning, is rarely absolute. You step outside after tending the fire, boots crunching through snow that's been disturbed since yesterday. The wolf tracks are half filled now, softened by fresh flakes, but still visible if you know how to look. You follow them briefly, just far enough to confirm what you already suspected. The animal circled, assessed, and moved on. No lingering. No desperation. That's good news. It reminds you of something older trappers used to say, that predators mirror your own condition. If they keep distance, you're still doing something right. If they linger, if they press closer each night, it means the balance is shifting. You don't plan to let it. Back inside, you prepare for the day with more intention than usual. You eat a small meal, drink warmed water, stretch your legs slowly. These little rituals aren't just about comfort anymore. They're signals, to yourself mostly. Proof that you're still capable of choosing, not just reacting. There's a persistent myth that mountain men were always alone, that winter turned them into solitary ghosts wandering frozen landscapes. The reality, historians argue, was more complicated. Total isolation happened, yes, but more often men existed in loose networks, cabins spaced days apart, trap lines overlapping, occasional visits made when supplies ran low or sanity ran thinner. You think about that as you step outside again, scanning the tree line. Somewhere out there, beyond ridges and frozen creeks, someone else might be doing the same calculations you are, counting wood, counting food, wondering whether to risk a journey for company or supplies. You haven't seen anyone in months. That doesn't mean no one's nearby. The idea is both comforting and unsettling. You spend the late morning reinforcing your traps, adding a few new ones where animal sign has returned. The work is slow, deliberate. Your fingers are stiff but steadier than they were a few days ago. The fever's gone now, leaving behind only fatigue and a lingering dryness in your throat. You manage it with frequent sips of water, disciplined and measured. This is another truth winter teaches. Recovery is never instant. You don't bounce back, you edge back. As you work, you find yourself talking again, not out of fear, but habit. commenting on the snow, on the way the trees creak, on the cleverness of a rabbit that managed to avoid your snares. The sound of your own voice grounds you. It draws a boundary between imagination and reality. Some scholars argue that this kind of self-talk was common among isolated trappers, a practical adaptation rather than a sign of instability. Others see it as an early warning sign of mental strain. You don't care which camp is right. It helps. That's enough. By afternoon, clouds roll in again, thick and low. Snow threatens but doesn't fall yet. The light flattens, stealing depth from the landscape. Distance becomes hard to judge. You decide not to wander far today. After the wolf encounter, discretion feels wise. Inside, the cabin feels almost lived in. Not comfortable exactly, but familiar. The hides on the walls dull the wind's voice. The fire burns steadily. No smoke today. You take a moment to appreciate that small success. You sit by the hearth and mend gear again, always mending. Clothing, straps, seams. Mountain men were never done fixing things. Everything out here degraded constantly and neglect multiplied fast. A loose stitch became a torn coat. A torn coat became frostbite. Frostbite became something you couldn't ignore. There's an old argument among historians about whether mountain men were truly self-reliant or simply lucky. Sitting here, needle in hand, you think the argument misses the point. Self-reliance wasn't about never needing help. It was about delaying the moment when you did. As dusk approaches, you hear distant sounds again. Not wolves this time. Something else. A faint echo, almost lost in the wind. It could be a tree cracking. Could be ice shifting. Could be a human sound. You freeze, listening hard. It doesn't repeat. Your heart rate climbs anyway. The possibility lingers. You weigh it carefully. Calling out might bring help. Or it might bring trouble. Out here you don't assume goodwill. Winter squeezes people, makes them unpredictable. You decide to wait. This hesitation, this calculation, is something you've grown into. Early on you might have rushed toward the idea of company. Now you understand the cost of being wrong. Night falls again, smooth and heavy. You secure the door, bank the fire, arrange your sleeping area with practiced efficiency. You keep the rifle within, reach, but not clutched. Ready, not desperate. Lying back, you think about how isolation has changed shape over the weeks. At first it was loud, an absence you couldn't stop noticing. Then it became quiet, like background cold. Now, it feels more like a condition you manage, like hunger or thirst. You're not alone in the way you once feared. You're connected to the fire, to the cabin, to the animals outside, to unseen people who might be counting the same stars somewhere beyond the trees. That thought settles you more than you expect. Sleep comes easier tonight. Still light, still fragmented, but gentler. When you wake briefly to tend the fire, you don't feel disoriented. You know where you are. You know what's required. Tomorrow might bring tracks, or visitors, or nothing at all. And you're learning that survival isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about staying open enough to respond when the world finally knocks back. You wake before the fire needs you, and that feels like progress. Not energy, rhythm. Your body has learned the night schedule, when to surface, when to listen, when to feed the coals just enough to keep the cold from slipping in too close. You sit up quietly, careful not to waste movement, and add a single log. The flames respond politely, no smoke, no drama. You nod to yourself. Another small victory. Firelight routines matter more now than anything else. You notice it most in the evenings, when the light outside fades into nothing and the cabin becomes the entire world. The fire takes over as the sun's replacement, and everything you do starts orbiting around it. You've developed habits you don't remember choosing, ways of sitting, places you set tools, times you check the door latch without thinking. These routines aren't comfort, they're scaffolding, holding your days upright. Mountain men lived by routines in winter, even when they pretended they didn't. Diaries mention fixed hours for feeding fires, for boiling water, for checking traps, often written with military precision. Some historians argue this was leftover discipline from earlier lives as soldiers or sailors. Others think it was simply necessity. Out here, routine is insulation for the mind. You stretch slowly, joints loosening one by one. Your body feels lighter than it did a week ago, not stronger, just steadier. The fever's gone, hunger is quieter for now, and the cabin hasn't made any alarming new sounds overnight. You take inventory, internal and external, the way you always do. You eat a measured breakfast by firelight. Not much, enough. You drink warmed water and feel it settle. Then you sit still for a few minutes, letting the heat soak into you before doing anything else. Rushing wastes warmth. Outside, the day is grey again, but not hostile. The cold is present, but it's not shouting. You decide it's a maintenance day. No long trips, no heavy work, just keeping things from slipping backward. You start, with the firewood, splitting a few logs inside the cabin where the cold won't steal as much from you. The rhythm of the work is soothing. Raise the axe, breathe, split, stack. Each movement produces a sound you recognise. Familiar sounds are calming, predictable. By midday the firelight has shifted, shadows leaning toward the back wall. You notice how different the cabin looks at this hour, how the hides catch light, how the soot patterns tell a story of every fire you've kept alive. You trace one blackened streak with your eyes and remember the night it came from, when the flue clogged and smoke poured back in. You remember coughing, swearing, fixing it half blind. The mark is still there, proof you adapted. You heat a small pot of broth and eat slowly, spoon resting in your lap between bites. Eating by firelight feels ceremonial now, almost respectful. You don't rush it. Food has become something you acknowledge, not just consume. In the afternoon you settle into a chair you made from a split log and pelts. It's not comfortable, but it's yours. You mend again, always mending. You've repaired the same glove so many times it's more thread than original fabric. Still, it works. That's all that matters. There's a quirky note in an old journal you remember, where a trapper wrote that winter evenings were for tending the small things. Not the big dangers. Those were fought during the day. Evenings were for preventing little failures from growing overnight. A loose seam, a cracked bowl, a dull blade. You understand that now. As daylight drains away, you begin your evening circuit. You check the door seal. You pack a little more chinking into a spot near the floor. You adjust the hides to block a faint draft. Each action is small, but together they create a feeling of control. Not mastery, management. The fire burns clean tonight. You bank it carefully, stacking logs so they'll burn slow and steady. You test the airflow with your hand, watching smoke rise straight and obedient. You smile faintly. It's been a while since the fire misbehaved. You sit back and let the warmth spread. This is the hour when thoughts usually get loud, when the day's work is done and the night stretches out like an empty road. But tonight, the routine holds. You occupy your hands, your eyes, your mind. You sharpen your knife by firelight, slow and deliberate, listening to the scrape of stone on steel. Some scholars argue that mountain men developed almost meditative states during winter evenings, brought on by repetition and isolation. Others think it was simply exhaustion masquerading as calm. Sitting here, you don't care what it's called. You feel present, grounded. Outside, the wind brushes the cabin lightly, more curious than aggressive. The walls answer with soft creaks, but nothing alarming. You listen anyway, always. You write a short journal entry, just a few lines. Fire behaved, cabin quiet, body steady. It's not poetry. It's documentation, a record that today did not defeat you. You eat your evening meal slowly, closer to the fire than usual. You savour the heat more than the taste. Your stomach settles, content enough. You don't push it. Overeating makes you sluggish, and sluggishness leads to mistakes. As night deepens, you arrange your sleeping space with ritual precision. Boots near the hearth, knife within reach, extra wood stacked close, water ready, everything where it belongs. This order is comforting in a way you didn't expect. It turns chaos into something you can navigate in the dark. You lie down and stare at the fire for a while, watching the flames move with lazy confidence. You notice how your breathing has slowed, matched itself to the room. You don't feel watched tonight. You don't feel alone in the bad way. This is another thing winter teaches. Survival isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet competence. Sometimes it's getting through a day without anything going wrong. Sleep comes gradually, not forced. You drift, Wake briefly to add a log, drift again. Each time you surface, the fire is still there, the cabin still holds, your body still responds when asked. Tomorrow will bring its own problems. It always does. But tonight, routine has done its job. Firelight flickers, shadows behave, the world outside can wait. And for a man wintering alone in a wooden cabin, that calm, earned, fragile, temporary, is one of the rarest luxuries there is. Rest, you've learned, is a dangerous word out here. You wake with stiffness deep in your spine, the kind that doesn't fade after stretching. It lingers, a reminder that stillness carries its own risks. The fire has burned lower than you like, but not out. You correct it immediately, feeding it a log and watching the flames reassert themselves. You don't scold yourself. Winter punishes distraction harshly enough without adding guilt to the mix. Today isn't a rest day. There's no such thing anymore. Winter work never stops. It just changes shape. You pull on your coat and step outside, breath catching in your throat as cold air rushes in. The sky's pale, almost white, the sun hidden behind a thin veil of cloud. Snow crunches underfoot in that brittle, high-pitched way that tells you it's colder than it looks. You scan the area automatically. Tree line, trap line, roof door, everything still standing, for now. You start with the roof again. Snow builds faster than you want to admit, especially after quiet nights when it falls gently but relentlessly. You shovel carefully, aware of your balance, aware of how unforgiving a slip could be. The work warms you just enough to sweat lightly, and you stop immediately. Sweat is the enemy. You strip a layer, wait for your breathing to slow, then continue. This is the kind of discipline mountain men learned through loss. Those who didn't learn it didn't last long enough to write about it. Back inside, you change, damp clothes for dry ones and hang the wet near the fire, rotating them slowly to avoid scorching. You've seen what burned fabric looks like. It's not worth repeating. You eat a small snack. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep your hands steady, and drink warmed water. Fuel in, fuel out, everything measured. You spend the late morning splitting wood again. Not because you need it immediately, but because tomorrow might not allow it. Storms decide schedules now, not you. The repetitive motion settles your thoughts. Each split log another hour of warmth banked against the future. You stack the wood neatly, angled so air can circulate. Sloppy stacks rot. Rot wastes effort. Effort is life. There's a historical argument about whether mountain men work themselves too hard in winter. Some journals describe exhaustion bordering on collapse. Others describe men doing almost nothing for days. The truth likely depended on conditions and temperament. You've learned to work just enough to stay ahead. Never far ahead, never behind. By midday, the cold sharpens again. You retreat indoors and tend the fire, adjusting airflow until it burns slow and even. You listen to it like a mechanic listens to an engine, noting subtle changes. Fires talk. They always have. You just have to learn the language. You repair a loose peg in the door hinge, tapping it back into place with careful strikes. A sagging door invites drafts, and drafts invite long, miserable nights. Small fixes prevent big problems. That's the winter philosophy distilled. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, pushing snow into new drifts. You watch it through the window slit, noting patterns. Where it piles today is where it will pile again tomorrow. You make a mental note to shovel those spots first, next time. Winter rewards observation. Afternoon fades without ceremony. You eat another modest meal, chewing slowly, savouring warmth more than flavour. Hunger has become manageable again. Not gone, just quieter. You don't trust that. Hunger waits for complacency. You spend the remaining daylight checking gear, knife sharp, rifle clean, traps intact. You don't expect to use them today, but readiness is its own form of comfort. There's a debate among scholars about whether preparedness reduced anxiety or increased it by keeping danger constantly in mind. Sitting here, methodical and calm, you think it does both, and that's acceptable. As darkness settles, the cabin comes alive with its familiar chorus. Pops, creaks, soft groans. You listen without alarm. These sounds have become part of your environment, like waves to a sailor. You note changes, but you don't jump at every noise anymore. That, too, is progress. You bank the fire for the night, setting it to burn steady rather than hot. You arrange your sleeping area with care, ensuring nothing blocks your path to the door. You've never needed to leave in a hurry. But winter has a way of punishing assumptions. Lying down, you feel the weight of the day settle into your bones. It's not exhaustion, it's accumulation. Weeks of cold, hunger, vigilance. You breathe slowly, letting the fire's rhythm guide you. Each crackle is a reminder that work continues even while you rest. Tomorrow you'll do it again. Shovel, split, mend, count, listen. Winter doesn't end because you're tired. It doesn't pause because you've earned it. The only way through is steady effort, day after day, refusing to fall behind. As sleep creeps in, you realise something quietly profound. The work itself has become your anchor. As long as there's something to do, something to fix, something to prepare, you're still part of the world, not just enduring it. The fire glows low, the cabin holds, outside the mountain waits, and you rest, knowing that when morning comes, winter will still be there, patient, relentless, and ready for you to meet it again. You know something's wrong before you can name it. It's not a sound, exactly. More like the absence of the right ones. The cabin feels off. The usual rhythm of creaks and settling is uneven, like a heartbeat skipping every few beats. You sit up slowly, scanning the room, letting your eyes adjust to firelight and shadow. The fire's fine. The door's shut. Nothing obvious. Then you see it. A thin line of snow on the floor near the back wall. Just a dusting. Barely enough to notice unless you're already looking for trouble. You kneel and brush it aside with your glove, exposing damp earth beneath. Cold seeps up immediately. The wall has shifted, not collapsed, not dramatically. Just enough to open a seam where snow and wind have found a way in. You press your palm against the logs and feel it. A subtle give that wasn't there before. Your jaw tightens. This is the kind of failure that kills people. Cabins don't usually fail all at once. They fail quietly, incrementally, while you're busy worrying about other things. A small roof sag becomes a leak becomes rot becomes collapse. Mountain men wrote about it with an almost casual tone. Wall gave in, or roof went soft. No drama, just consequences. You stand and pull on your coat immediately. No hesitation. This isn't something you wait on. You grab your axe, a length of spare timber, and a bundle of chinking materials. Outside, the cold slaps you awake fully. The sky's low and grey, snow drifting again, fine and persistent. You circle the cabin, crouching to inspect the base of the wall. Snow has drifted high here, pressing constantly against the logs. Moisture froze, expanded and forced the seam wider. It's basic physics, unforgiving physics. You shovel snow away from the base until your arms burn. You don't stop when they start burning. You stop when the wall can breathe again. Then you wedge the spare timber inside, angling it between floor and wall, driving it tight with controlled blows from the axe handle. The wall shifts back a fraction. Enough. Inside again, you pack the gap with mud and moss, pressing hard, smearing it smooth. Your fingers go numb quickly. You work anyway. Precision matters less than speed right now. You'll refine it later if you can. This kind of repair shows up again and again in old journals. Temporary braces, emergency patches, men living all winter in structures that were slowly coming apart, holding them together with ingenuity and stubbornness. Scholars debate whether these cabins were poorly built or simply overwhelmed by conditions. Sitting here, breath fogging, hands aching, you think the answer is obvious. Winter doesn't care how well you planned. By the time you finish, the room smells like wet earth and smoke. Snow still trickles in through other cracks, but not like before. The immediate threat is delayed. That's the best you ever get out here. Delay. You sit heavily by the fire, heart pounding harder than the work alone would justify. Adrenaline takes time to bleed off in the cold. You sip water and force yourself to breathe slower, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The same routine you've used after close calls since early winter. Cabin failures weren't rare. Roof collapses under snow load were the most common, especially when men got sick or lazy and stopped clearing them regularly. Wall failures came next, usually from drifting snow and freeze-thaw cycles. Floors rotted, chimneys cracked, doors warped shut. Each failure demanded energy you didn't always have. There's a fringe account from a trapper who claimed he spent an entire February sleeping with his feet braced against a wall that wanted to fall inward. Whether that's true or exaggerated, you understand the impulse now. You've learned to sleep lightly, listening not just for animals, but for wood giving way. The rest of the day is damage control. You reinforce other weak points, tapping supports into place, adding extra hides where drafts creep in. You move slowly, carefully, conserving energy while refusing to stop. Stopping invites cold. Cold invites mistakes. By afternoon, the cabin feels tense but stable, like a wounded animal that's decided not to die today. You take that as a win. You eat a small meal without appetite, chewing mechanically. The stress lingers, buzzing under your skin. You replay the moment you saw the snow on the floor, imagining what might have happened if you'd slept another hour, or if the temperature had dropped faster, or if you'd ignored it as nothing. That's the thing about winter failures. They don't announce themselves as emergencies until they are. Everything before that feels optional, and nothing is optional. As evening approaches, the wind rises slightly, testing your repairs. You listen closely. The wall holds. The brace creaks but doesn't slip. You add more wood to the fire than usual, not for warmth, but for morale. Bright light helps steady your thoughts. You write about the failure in your journal briefly and plainly. Wall shifted, rebraced, holding. You don't embellish. There's no need. The facts are enough. Some historians argue that mountain men survived winters not through toughness, but through vigilance, constant awareness, the refusal to assume things would keep working just because they had yesterday. You think that's right. Toughness helps, but attention saves lives. Night falls hard. Snow thickens outside, tapping softly against the cabin like fingers testing glass. You arrange your sleeping space closer to the fire and farther from the repaired wall, just in case. You keep your boots on, just in case. You place the axe within reach, just in case. Sleep is light, fractured by the occasional creak or pop. Each time you wake, you listen, heart pounding until your brain sorts sound into familiar patterns. The wall stays put. The fire stays lit. The cabin, for now, remains standing. Somewhere in the middle of the night, you realize your hands are clenched into fists. You force them to relax. Tension wastes energy. Energy is everything. By morning, you'll inspect the repair again. You always do. Winter doesn't respect yesterday's solutions, but you made it through another test, another quiet attempt by the season to erase you from the landscape. And as you drift into a shallow sleep, you accept a truth that's becoming clearer every day. Survival isn't about building something that never fails. It's about being there when it does, and having just enough left to hold it together one more time. The night stretches long after the wall repair, not in hours but in weight. You feel it pressing down on you as you lie there, eyes half open, listening. The cabin doesn't sound angry tonight, just tired, like it's done arguing with the cold and has settled into a stubborn silence. You wake before dawn again, not because something startled you, but because your body refuses deep sleep anymore. You sit up slowly, testing the air, cold but manageable. The fire is low, exactly where you left it. That helps. Consistency is calming now. You feed the fire and let the flames grow before you do anything else. The light pushes back the shadows, and with it comes the familiar urge to fill the quiet. Not with work yet, with memory. You reach for the stories. Mountain men didn't carry much into winter. Weight mattered, space mattered. But stories, those were light enough to keep. They lived in your head, in half-remembered conversations, in exaggerations told around fires long before this one. When the nights grew too long, stories became insulation for the mind. You start with an old one you've told yourself before, about a rendezvous years back when the valley was crowded with men who smelled like smoke and leather and bravado. Someone was always telling a story, half true, half invented, about a bear that walked upright, or a river that swallowed canoes whole. You remember the laughter, loud and reckless, echoing off the hills. You remember thinking you'd never miss noise. Now you do. You speak the story aloud, quietly, as if someone might be listening. You don't act it out. You don't embellish too much. Just enough to hear a human voice moving through time. The sound warms the cabin differently than fire ever could. There's a historical note buried in a trapper's diary from the 1820s where he admits he told the same 3 stories to himself all winter. He claimed they changed slightly each time, adapting to his mood. Scholars debate whether that was creativity or early cognitive drift. You think it was survival. When the story runs out, you let the silence return. But it doesn't bite as hard this time. You stir the fire, sip warmed water, and feel your shoulders drop a fraction. Later in the morning, you check the repaired wall again. It's holding. The brace creaks when you press on it, but it doesn't shift. You nod to it, a small acknowledgement like thanking a tired horse. You spend the daylight hours inside working on small things, a broken strap, a chipped cup. The same motions repeated slowly. Outside, snow falls in lazy flakes, not urgent, not heavy, just constant. The kind of snowfall that doesn't demand attention but steals time quietly. As afternoon fades, you feel the familiar tightening in your chest. Not panic, just the awareness of another long night ahead. This is when stories matter most. You sit closer to the fire and let your mind wander intentionally this time. Not drifting, directing. You think of the man who taught you how to set your first trap. His voice was always calm, even when correcting you. You replay his words, changing nothing. Just hearing them again feels like company. You remember another story, one you heard second-hand about a mountain man who survived an entire winter by telling stories to his axe. He leaned it against the wall and spoke to it every night, thanking it for the day's work, promising it rest. In spring, when he reached a settlement, he refused to sell it. Said it had listened too long to be traded. Scholars roll their eyes at stories like that, but you understand the instinct completely. The fire pops suddenly, louder than usual. You jump, then laugh under your breath. A short, sharp sound that startles you more than it should. You shake your head. Easy, you tell yourself, just wood. The laughter helps. It breaks the tension you didn't realize you were carrying. You cook a small evening meal and eat it slowly, deliberately, treating it as an event rather than a necessity. You don't rush. You let each bite mark time. This is dinner. This is evening. This is still a life, even if it's narrow. Afterward, you sit back and tell another story. This one about a river crossing gone wrong, where everything that could fall into the water did, including dignity. You chuckle softly at the memory, even though no one's there to hear it. The sound echoes, strangely off the walls, then settles. There's a scholarly debate about whether storytelling in isolation helps preserve mental health or accelerates detachment from reality. Some argue it keeps the mind engaged and flexible. Others suggest it blurs the line between memory and invention. Sitting here, wrapped in furs, firelight flickering, you don't care which is correct. You care that it works. Night deepens. The wind brushes the cabin, testing seams gently. The wall you repaired earlier makes no sound. You take that as a gift. You lie down with your head closer to the fire than usual, letting warmth soak into your neck and shoulders. You replay the stories again, not speaking now, just thinking them through, scene by scene. You focus on details, the smell of campfire smoke, the weight of a rifle slung over a shoulder, the sound of laughter carried on cold air. These details anchor you. They remind you that this moment, however intense, isn't the whole of existence. At some point, your thoughts slow. The stories lose their edges. Images blur gently instead of sharply. You realize you're drifting towards sleep without fighting it. The fire burns low but steady. The cabin holds. Outside, the mountain remains silent, patient. You don't dream much tonight. Or if you do, the dreams are soft and distant, more like echoes than events. You wake once to feed the fire, then settle back down without anxiety. Morning will come, the wall will need checking, the traps will need inspecting, hunger will return, and cold will still be waiting. But for tonight, stories have done their job. They've carried you across another long stretch of darkness without letting the silence close in too tight. And in a winter where everything is temporary, warmth, food, strength, that ability to fill the night with something human might be the most valuable skill of all. You wake to light. Not much, just a thin, pale wash slipping through the window slit and pooling faintly on the floor, but it's different from the grey you've grown used to. It has a hint of warmth to it, a softness that makes you pause before sitting up, as if you don't want to scare it away. You lie there for a moment, watching it, feeling something unfamiliar stir in your chest. Not comfort, not joy, anticipation. You sit up slowly and tend the fire, which has burned low but steady through the night. The embers catch easily. Another quiet success. You add a log and feel the heat return, then glance back at the light. It's still there. Not bright, but persistent. This is how you know something's shifting. You step outside after breakfast, if you can call it that, and stand still in the clearing. The air is cold, still brutally cold, but it feels different on your face. Less sharp, less angry. The sky is higher today, the clouds thinner, stretched like worn fabric instead of pressed flat and heavy. You look at the snow differently now. It's still deep, still dangerous, but you can see where it's settled unevenly, where it's sagging just a little under its own weight. You notice faint dark patches near tree trunks where the sun has touched them longer. Tiny things, easy to miss, but you don't miss them. Mountain men didn't measure winter by calendars. They measured it by signs, the angle of the sun, the behaviour of animals, the way snow sounded underfoot. Scholars debate exactly how attuned men really were to these changes, whether it was skill or coincidence, but the journals agree on one thing. Those who noticed early did better. You don't celebrate. Not yet. That would be foolish. Winter isn't done with you. But something in its grip has loosened, just slightly. You check your traps again, not expecting much. The walk feels marginally easier today. Your legs still ache, but they move more willingly. The snow crust breaks differently under your weight. Not softer exactly, but less brittle. You tell yourself it's nothing. Still, you pay attention. At the third trap, you stop. There's movement. Not imagination this time. Real, undeniable motion. A rabbit, caught cleanly, larger than the last one, thicker through the middle. You stand there for a second, staring, afraid to believe it. Then you let out a breath you didn't realise you were holding. Food, not a feast, not salvation, but momentum. You work carefully, hand steady, movements efficient. Nothing wasted. The process feels almost ceremonial now, practiced so many times that it calms you. You thank the animal quietly, not out of superstition, but respect. Out here, gratitude feels appropriate. Back at the cabin, you hang the meat properly, portioning with discipline. You don't eat immediately. That restraint feels like proof you're thinking clearly again. You boil water, clean tools, wipe down surfaces, small tasks done in order. Inside, the cabin feels patient, not strained like before. The repaired wall is still holding, the braces creak less. Even the fire seems cooperative today, burning clean, steady, obedient. You sit by the hearth and eat a measured portion of the rabbit, savouring the warmth spreading through your body more than the taste. You don't rush. You let your system wake up slowly, remembering how to receive nourishment without panic. As the afternoon unfolds, the light holds longer than it has in weeks, not dramatically, just enough to notice. You find yourself glancing at the window again and again, tracking it as it shifts across the floor. Each inch feels earned. There's an old argument among historians about whether mountain men experienced hope during winter, or whether hope only returned in spring. Some suggest winter was endured emotionally as well as physically, a long grey tunnel with no expectation of the light. Others argue that men lived in shorter increments, finding hope in daily signs rather than seasonal ones. Sitting here, watching light linger, you think the second camp has it right. Hope isn't loud out here. It's subtle, conditional, fragile. You spend the late afternoon preparing for more of these days. Not spring itself, but the transition. You clear extra snow away from the cabin base, knowing meltwater will come eventually. You dig shallow channels to direct runoff away from the walls. You reinforce the roof supports again, not because they're failing, but because wet snow weighs more than dry. Winter doesn't end cleanly. It transforms. You write in your journal for longer than usual today, not because something dramatic happened, but because you want to mark the change. Light stayed longer, rabbit in trap, snow sounds different. Simple notes, but they matter. As evening approaches, the temperature drops again, reminding you not to get ahead of yourself. You add wood to the fire and bank it carefully. You eat again, small portions spread out. Your stomach responds better this way now. You listen to it, to your body with renewed attention. Outside you hear movement again, but this time it's lighter. Birds, maybe, or squirrels testing the edges of winter's retreat. The sounds don't carry far yet. The world isn't awake, it's stretching. You sit quietly and let the sounds wash over you, not needing to name them. You feel steadier. The mental fog that crept in during the worst weeks has thinned. You're not euphoric, you're not relaxed, but you're present again in a way you haven't been for a while. Night falls, but it doesn't feel as heavy tonight. The darkness doesn't slam shut. It settles. You tell fewer stories this evening. You don't need them as much. Instead, you sharpen tools, check gear, make plans. Real plans, not just survival loops. You think about moving traps, about cutting wood farther out, about the possibility, distant but real, of leaving this place when the time comes. Not yet, but someday. You lie down and watch the fire, noticing how the shadows behave differently when you're not afraid of them. They're just shadows again. Wood and flame doing what they've always done. You sleep deeper tonight. Still not long, still light enough to wake when the fire shifts, but deeper than before. And when you wake briefly in the night, you realize something quietly astonishing. You're no longer counting days until winter ends. You're counting signs that it eventually will. And after everything you've endured, the hunger, the cold, the silence, the fear, that shift in perspective feels like the beginning of something new. Not spring, but survival turning finally toward forward motion. You wake with a sense of direction. Not urgency, not relief. Direction. The kind that settles quietly into your bones and stays there, steady and sure. The light through the window slit is stronger today. Not brighter in a dramatic way, just more present. It reaches farther across the floor, touching the edge of your bed of pine and fir before retreating. You sit up slowly and listen. The cabin answers with familiar sounds. Soft pops, a gentle groan from the roof as temperatures shift. No alarms, no surprises. The fire is low but alive, glowing patiently like it knows you'll get to it when you're ready. You do. You feed the fire and feel the warmth return faster than it used to. That's not your imagination. The walls are drier now. The hides have done their job. The structure has adapted along with you. Cabin and occupant, both worn but wiser. You eat a small breakfast, then step outside. The cold is still there, but it's changed character. It bites less and breathes more. The air smells different, sharper, cleaner, touched faintly with wet wood instead of only ice. Snow still blankets the land, but it no longer feels endless. You can see where it has begun to sag in shaded pockets, where gravity has started its quiet work. You don't celebrate, you observe. Mountain men who survived winters learned not to rush the thaw. Early melt brought its own dangers. Flooded creeks, collapsing roofs, rot. Spring killed nearly as many as winter, just with different tools. The journals warn about it repeatedly. Don't trust the thaw. You won't. You check the traps and find another small success. Not a bounty, just enough to confirm a pattern. Animals are moving more. Testing, just like you did weeks ago. The world is stretching awake, cautiously, after a long, punishing sleep. Back at the cabin, you begin the slow work of transition. Not leaving, preparing. You clear more snow from the base of the walls, widening the channels you started days ago. Meltwater will come, and when it does, it needs somewhere to go that isn't inside. You check the roof supports again, reinforcing places that might soften when wet. You open the door briefly to let damp air circulate, then close it before heat escapes too much. Balance. Always balance. Inside, you reorganize supplies, not just counting anymore, planning. What you'll eat first when food becomes more available. What you'll save for travel. What can be repaired now instead of later? These thoughts don't feel like daydreams. They feel practical. You write in your journal again, longer this time. Snow easing, animals moving, cabin holding, preparing for change. You pause, then add one more line. I'm still here. That matters. There's a long-standing scholarly debate about what winter survival did to mountain men afterward. Some say it hardened them permanently, made them quieter, more solitary. Others argue it sharpened them, made them more observant, more patient, better at reading the world. Sitting here, pencil resting in your fingers, you think both might be true. You feel changed, not broken, not triumphant. Changed. You spend the afternoon tending the fire, mending one last tear in your coat, sharpening tools you won't need for weeks but want ready anyway. You catch yourself humming at one point, a low, absent sound you don't remember choosing. You stop, smile faintly, then let it continue. As evening approaches, the temperature dips again, reminding you that winter still has teeth. You respect that. You add wood, settle in, eat carefully. You don't push your luck. Night comes softer now. Not gentler, but less oppressive. The darkness doesn't feel like a wall anymore, more like a curtain you know will lift again. You sit by the fire and think back over the weeks behind you. The cold mornings, the hunger, the fear when the wall shifted, the sickness, the wolf in the trees. None of it feels distant, but it feels contained, like something you passed through rather than something that swallowed you whole. You lie down and arrange your bedding with the same care you always have. Some habits don't leave. You check the fire one last time, then settle back, hands resting on your chest, breath slow and steady. Outside, the mountain remains what it has always been. Vast, indifferent, patient. It didn't spare you. It didn't chase you away. It simply waited to see if you would adapt. You did, not perfectly, not gracefully, but enough. As sleep comes, deeper than it has in a long while, you understand something clearly at last. Surviving winter in a wooden cabin wasn't about defeating the cold or conquering the mountains. It was about listening, adjusting, enduring without hardening into stone. And when morning comes again, and it will, you'll wake not as someone waiting for rescue, but as someone preparing to move forward when the time is right. Winter will release you slowly, on its own terms, and when it does, you'll carry what it taught you long after the snow is gone. The fire burns lower now, not from neglect, but intention. You let it. You sit with the quiet that once frightened you, and feel how different it is tonight. The cabin no longer feels like a trap or a test. It feels like a place that did its job. You breathe slowly, deeply, noticing how your chest rises without effort, how the air doesn't scrape on the way in anymore. Outside, the mountain rests under its blanket of snow, unchanged and unconcerned. It hasn't grown kinder, you've simply grown more fluent in its language. You think back to the beginning, how every sound felt like a threat, how hunger shouted, how the cold felt personal. You remember lying awake counting logs, counting hours, counting mistakes that hadn't happened yet. You remember fear pretending to be preparation. And you remember how, little by little, routine replaced panic. How listening replaced guessing. How surviving stopped feeling like resistance and started feeling like rhythm. Mountain men didn't emerge from winters like this unchanged. No one could. Some carried scars you could see. Missing fingers, damaged lungs, limps that never quite faded. Others carried quieter marks. Patience sharpened by necessity, a comfort with silence, a respect for limits. You feel those changes now, settling in gently, like the last embers, rearranging themselves before morning. The fire pops softly. You don't jump, you smile. You stretch out on your bed of fir and pine, letting your muscles loosen in ways they couldn't before. Sleep comes easier now, not because danger is gone, but because you know how to meet it. You don't need to listen for every sound anymore. You know which ones matter. Outside, the night moves slowly. Somewhere snow melts and refreezes. Somewhere animals test the edges of their territory. Somewhere the season begins its long retreat inch by inch. You close your eyes and let the warmth settle into you. Tomorrow will bring work. It always does. But it will also bring light and movement and choice. For now, you rest. The cabin holds, the fire glows, you breathe, and in the quiet space between one season and the next, you drift gently towards sleep, carrying with you the calm knowledge that you endured, one careful day at a time,